Oh, look how cute she looks. Little bump.
Oh, I know.
I know. Okay. I'd like to call the meeting of the Mountain View Westman School District to order at 6:45 p.m. Will you all please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I think we probably have a couple of trustees who are still on their way, but may we have roll call, please?
Ellen Wheeler.
Tamara Wilson.
Laura Blakely. And let the record reflect that trustees Gutierrez and Caldonado will hopefully be here shortly.
And we have quorum.
And we have a quorum. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. On a motion made by trustee Wheeler and seconded by trustee Wilson, the agenda is approved unanimously by the three of us in attendance. Okay, and now at 6:47, oh, I'm sorry. We have an opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. Did anybody want to speak on any item on the closed session agenda? You can turn your card in later. Thank you. And please state your name.
Turn the mic up.
On the top. Yeah, there you go.
Now.
Thank you.
My name is Monica Fletcher, and I just was curious on how the board envisions using this space for comment from the public when there's very little
Right.
information in the packet talks about what actually going to be discussed in closed session.
Mhm.
So there is a space for public comment, but I just don't understand exactly what information is being discussed.
Thank you. Because it's closed session and this is by matter of statute, there are certain things that we can't include in the agenda, and this is all very statutorily spelled out. So the items on closed session agenda for this evening are negotiations, the conference with the labor negotiators with the Mountain View Educators Association, and the second item is public employee discipline dismissal release. And frankly, we don't know what those items are either. We won't know until we go into closed session. So you're as informed as we are. Well, if you had something to say about the union or something like that, you could talk about that. But thank you. Okay, and now at 6:49, first I want to let the record reflect that trustees Gutierrez and Caldonado have arrived. And at 6:49, we are going into closed session.
It would chill out. What is it?
Yeah, that too.
I don't know. I guess I should. Or maybe you could.
Just a FYI. When so he's going to be on Zoom. I'll have the computer so when you guys ask questions, I'll have some questions. Because I'll have the computer. He's going to be on Zoom conference.
Okay, so we asked you in your email. Got it. Thank you. Okay, at 7:03 p.m., the May 3rd meeting of the Mountain View Wisconsin School District Board of Trustees is called back to order after closed session. And I'd like to report that no action was taken in closed session. The consent agenda is the next item on our agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Trustee Gutierrez, are you voting on the consent agenda? Okay, on a motion made by Trustee Wheeler and seconded by Trustee Coladonato, the consent agenda was approved by a vote of 4, including Trustees Wheeler, Wilson, Coladonato, and Blakely, and Trustee Gutierrez abstained. All right, the next item on the agenda is communications. Are there any members of employee organizations wishing to comment this evening?
No. Oh, now I can.
Is the light on?
Maybe the battery.
Yes. We'll figure it out. It wasn't working a second.
Oh, was
Much better, right?
Thank
Thank you. Okay, so good evening. Okay, I'm Emily Zapata. I am the president of our Teachers Association. Standing next to me is Sean Dechter, our vice president. And so we have had 6 sessions of negotiations. At our last negotiation meeting, we mutually agreed to pause negotiations until June so that more data could be collected regarding the scope of next year's budget. In the last few years, we've made growth towards being more competitive with our surrounding districts. And as noted in the total compensation survey study presented to you January 18th, 6 out of the 10 districts provided the 2016-2017 salary schedules. In looking at information, these districts now have their current salary schedules for their school year. So although the total compensation survey from November 2017 conducted by School Services of California, Inc. shows that we rank second among like districts, the updated salaries for those 6 districts might show otherwise. For example, in the compensation study, it states that Union School District started salary was $59,373. Currently, their starting salary is now $61,000, so about $61,000, which would then change our ranking and place them above us in salary. So note that this is just 1 out of the 6 districts in the total compensation survey that did not have an updated salary schedule. So we're starting to move forward in the right direction, but we still have a lot more room to grow to be competitive, to be a competitive district for our area. And as always, we negotiate with students and teachers in the front of our minds. Our positions and actions are guided by creating a sustaining, thriving environments where teachers can make the most difference for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zapata. Okay, are there any members of district committees here this evening that would like to make a comment or speak to the board? Dr. Rudolph, do you have any comments for us?
No comment.
Okay.
We gotta figure out.
Yeah, we do. Do you want to?
No.
Do you want to use this one?
We're good.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
Because now's the time to figure it out. We have, now is the time for community comments. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on any non-agenda items. Speakers are requested to complete a speaker card and state their name for the record. And if there are additional comments after 10 minutes have elapsed, this item may be continued after all action and discussion items are completed. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on any items that are not on the agenda this evening? Okay. Thank you. So we're moving on to review and action. And the first item on the agenda is the award of guaranteed minimum price contract to BHM Construction, Inc. for pre-construction, procurement, and demolition for the Mistral Elementary School Phase 4 project. Dr. Clark.
Thank you. Staff is here asking for the board to award the GMP guaranteed maximum price to BHM for the pre-construction services for Mistral Phase 4. Right now, Mistral Phase 4 includes the demolition of the existing MUR, the building of the brand new kindergarten wing, that's 3 modular classrooms, the renovation of the existing Castro Mistral admin building, which will become the Mistral admin building, and then also the 2 flex rooms. The existing library turns into 2 flex rooms. So right now we do not have DSA approval for the 3 kindergarten buildings. What we'd like to do is go ahead and award the first increment for the pre-construction services to BHM in the amount of $1,723,900 so they can actually get started on purchasing the equipment and the supplies they need to do as much as they can this summer while we're waiting for DSA approval.
Thank you. Trustees, any clarifying questions? Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Any other questions or comments, trustees? May I have a motion? Oh, isn't this
Yes.
action? Yeah, we need a motion.
Yes.
Can we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the award of guaranteed maximum price contract to BHM Construction, Inc. for pre-construction, procurement, and demolition for the Mistral Elementary School Phase 4 project.
And for the first increment.
Hmm?
You're talking about the first increment only.
Right. This action tonight is only for pre-construction services. Well, as soon as we get out of DSA, we'll come back for the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price for the rest of the work. Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, on a motion made by trustee Wilson and seconded by trustee Gutierrez, the award of guaranteed maximum price contract to BHM Construction for pre-construction, procurement, and demolition from the Mistral Elementary School Phase 4 project, that's a lot of Ps, was approved unanimously. Okay, the next item is Resolution 1669.5/18, developer fee rates increase based on the presented developer fee study and recent action of the State Allocation Board and public hearing. Dr. Clark.
Yes, thank you. Just a reminder, we will have to conduct a public hearing for this action. So the background is on the cover page, but in short, the School Allocation Board meets every other even year. Wait, that's not right. Every even year in January, 14, 16, they just met in January of 18 to assess the developer fee rates for the states. This is actually a sizable increase over the 2016 rates for January of 18. Currently, we collect developer fee rates. Anyone in Mountain View who does a home improvement project, a company who wants to add on to an existing structure, a company who wants to build here, any entity, essentially any development that goes on inside the city, residential, commercial, and storage space, each school district is able to levy a fee to collect developer fees in certain amounts. We had to go out and do a developer fee study. Jack Schrader and Associates is the one who conducted the study for us. And what they're recommending based on our need, our current construction in Mountain View, is to levy the new rates. The residential rate will go up by 21 cents per square foot. And the rate for commercial industrial construction will go up 5 cents per square foot. For us, after board action, if the board so approves this, we have to wait a 60-day period, and then we can start to levy the new rates for any other construction goes on in the district or in Mountain View.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions, trustees? Any members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Any further questions or comments?
So public hearing portion.
Oh, I'm sorry. At 7:13, we have a public hearing on this item. Were there any members of the public wishing to comment? Okay, at 7:13 and 30 seconds, the public hearing is closed. Okay, now, are there any further, thank you, Trustee Wheeler. Are there any further comments or remarks, questions? May I have a motion to approve this resolution?
I move to approve Resolution 1669.5/18, developer fee rates increase based on the presented developer fee study and recent action of the State Allocation Board and public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, on a motion made by Trustee Wilson and seconded by Trustee Wheeler, the motion was approved on a vote of 4-0 by Trustees Wheeler, Wilson, Coladonado, and Blakely. Trustee Gutierrez had stepped out for a moment, so he abstained. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the award, more alliteration here, award additional services contract to DTA for added design scope for the school on North Westman. Dr. Clark?
Thank you. When Dreiling Tronis Architecture, DTA, was awarded the contract for the construction of Slater, AKA the school formerly known as Slater on North Westman, we had not decided whether the on Westman was going to be a mechanized crosswalk or if it was going to be a signal. And since we awarded the contract, we wanted them to get going on the rest of the project itself. And now we've determined that we're going to actually put in a signal, split the cost with the city 50 each, 50%. And so now we actually need DTA as the architect to do the original, the remaining design work for this signal.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions, trustees? Members of the public? Additional questions or comments? Do I have a motion to approve the award of additionals? What?
I was saying Trustee Wilson can go 3 for 3 here.
I
About
move to
1,000.
award the additional services contract to DTA for added design scope for the school on North Westman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, on a motion made by Trustee Wilson, seconded by Trustee Wheeler, the award of additional services contract to DTA for added design scope for the school on North Westman was approved by a vote of 4, including Trustees Wheeler, Wilson, Coladonado, and Blakely, to 0. Trustee Gutierrez stepped out for a moment, so he abstained and did not vote. Thank you. Now we are moving to the review and discussion portion of the meeting, and the next item on the agenda, its updates for information, is the Strategic Plan 2021 Capstone Project Update.
Correct.
Dr. Rudolph.
So I'm only going to be here for a quick second, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Westover and her team so that they can talk about it. But I just want to talk real quickly about what the Capstone Project is. Under the Strategic Plan Goal 1, we wanted to make sure that every student was prepared for high school. And through that, one of our action items is to develop a capstone project. And so we were pretty fortunate that last year, Ms. Westover, as well as Mr. Chang, who is currently in Southern California, accepting the Distinguished School Award, came to us and said that we have an idea that we would like to try around project-based learning, and in the case of Stevenson, around design thinking. And whether or not the district would be willing to fund sort of this initiative. So then I responded, we'd be more than willing to fund for them to do professional development. I think we both kicked in probably half. And then I said, but on the condition that you start working on our capstone projects. And so just for the public's record, the capstone experiences was part of our strategic plan conversation, where parents were concerned that we would simply focus on improving test scores and really wanted to make sure that the profile of the graduate was a living and breathing approach to how we taught our kids, as opposed to focusing just on test scores. And so we have 2 capstone projects that will take place. The first one, one in 5th grade and one in 8th grade, with the idea that these will be implemented in a 2021 school year, or 2020-2021 school year. And so I am pleased to turn it over to the wonderful team over here at Stevenson, which has developed our first capstone, and they're going to tell you more about it.
First trick of the evening is to figure out how the clicker works. My name is Amanda Clem. I'm currently teaching 5th grade at Stevenson. Many of you know Gail Dyer. She's our instructional coach. And of course, Rebecca Westover, our principal. While we were developing this project,
Can we ask you to speak into the
oh, sure.
Yeah.
Is that better? Thank you. While we were developing this project, we wanted to include the profile of a graduate, which includes being collaborative, a critical thinker, curious and engaged, creative, flexible and adaptable, and an effective communicator. I'll practice that as well. While we were developing this project, it was really interesting because as coworkers and as teachers, we actually used all of these in the design process of it. So hey, we're all students here, so that was a kudos to us. Throughout the PowerPoint tonight, you'll see hyperlinks at the bottom, which also will be used throughout the project to help teachers as they were to implement our project. To help us design this capstone project, we invited the design team, the design school from Stanford in to talk us through the process, and we worked collaboratively to create a journey map to guide us as we were developing it.
So come here. So as we were developing it, we wanted to keep in mind that this is something we would want every school site to be able to do. And depending on the school site, every school site has different needs, different students, and different teachers. So trying to build in as much flexibility as we could. So this is a diagram of the same thing that you saw on the whiteboard before, but a little bit easier to read format. I'm going to briefly walk you through an overview of what the project looks like, and then we'll talk a little bit more about a couple of the details that are fun. So the idea is that it starts with reading a book, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, and where students really get to learn that they can create change. And it's an amazing story about a young man who was able to create positive change in his community through being a critical thinker. And Ms. Dyer is going to talk a little bit about what the book is about. That's our intro. Teachers can choose to do it as a whole class reading or can do it as a read aloud. Then students get the chance to explore. So in the diagram, there's box 1. So box 1 for the, let's see, it won't work. For creating a water filter, they get these wonderful green tubs, and on the bottom, there's mesh. So they get to explore to see if they're able to mechanically filter water. All the students then get to explore box 1 for the connection between electricity and magnetism. And from there, they get to choose which one am I most interested in pursuing. So they get the option of having choice. Then once they make their choice, they do research and figure out, well, in box 1, in either case, they weren't able to create either a good filter or to create a flashlight, which is what box 1, the second strand, leads to. So then they get to go through the research process, and they're given a second box with materials in it. In the second box for the water filtration side, they get materials to make a simple homemade filter, and they have to figure out how to filter the water, also taking things like vinegar and food coloring out of the water. So not just solid pieces. If they follow the other route, they have to make a Faraday flashlight. And we don't think it'll be perfect. So this is the one we did together. It took us about an hour. This is a Faraday flashlight, and we'll talk you through how the kids will make that.
All right. So the capstone covers many standards. So the standards are science standards, design and design process standards. It covers writing and research standards, as well as speaking and listening standards. So the capstone's very cross-curricular.
Excuse me, would you mind trying to speak into the microphone for the folks at home? We can hear you great, but thank you.
Sure. So we're starting with kind of background knowledge. So we're building some background by having the students read The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, the Young Readers Edition. So in this book, a young boy by the name of William is trying to solve the problem of bringing electricity to his village. He does this by building a windmill. So he's a 14-year-old boy, so it's kind of exciting for the kids because they get to see a boy who's bringing change and making a difference for his community. We also chose this book for a couple other reasons. One was that the book's nonfiction, the 5th grade reading level, and it's highly engaging. And as William is going about building this windmill, he's going through many of the skills that we see in the profile of a graduate. He's a critical thinker. He's engaged. He's curious, creative. He's flexible and adaptable. So he's using many of the skills that we're wanting our own students to develop. And we want the kids to see another child making a difference. It was really important too, though, to provide choice. So as they're reading the book, teachers get choice. They can either do the book as a read aloud, or they can have students read it individually. We're trying to provide teachers with all the resources they need. So we also have guiding questions that they can use for each of the chapters if they so choose. And the guiding questions just allow them to have a good discussion. So in the end, they will start to get excited about this opportunity that even they can bring about change and make a difference.
We designed the project to be user-friendly. The green slides that you'll see are slides for teacher information, and the orange slides that you see are for student presentation. For example, if a teacher would like to remind themselves how a water filtration system works, we have a link for them to go ahead and check out, as well as in preparing the boxes, items to be purchased. We will be using a capstone journal. We have a choice where they can maybe follow our guideline that we've suggested. Maybe they have a way that they prefer for their class as well. Again, things that are located in the boxes, questions that you can be asking. Here are a few of a couple snapshots of what might be in the student information slides, such as the scientific process, what you will find in box 1, and guiding questions for them as well. Again, there's a link if you'd like to use the journal that we suggested. That's great. There's also option for teachers to pick one of their choice. We leave a section for questioning to analyze data and draw conclusions. And at the end of box 1, of course, the children will see and probably still smell that they cannot enjoy this lovely water, and then can either choose to dig deeper into this project and topic or go ahead and move on.
So all students will do box 1 of building the first piece of building a water filtration system. They'll get to investigate, but then they'll all also get to investigate the first box of investigating about electricity and magnetism. And so it's the same process. The teacher has slides that the teacher can use, some suggestions of materials that they might use if they need to brush up on their own knowledge, as well as information they can use with the students, things they need to purchase, and then again, their student slides, and it walks through the same process again with the scientific process. It has the kids do the investigation. They get to analyze data, draw conclusions. So they're going through the very similar process. And then we've also tried to add additional information in case students aren't getting the material or the teacher just wants some more resources.
So another important component of this is the research component. So they've been presented with the problems. They know they don't have the tools to get to where they want to go yet. So now they get to do the research process. And part of the research process is the kids determining if they're looking at a good source or a bad source of information. So this can, for most of our students, this will be a review, but also a way for them to revisit how they determine a good source from a bad source. We'll have a list of different websites that the kids can use so they can go between the different sites, because the hope is that eventually the writing the students do will also be used as the benchmark or the writing assessment during the third trimester. And to make it manageable for teachers, we didn't want to let the kids go wild on the internet because they would spend probably hours tracking down which website the kids went to. So we'll provide a list of probably 15 to 20 websites that kids can choose from during their first round of writing. For the second boxes, it follows the same process as box 1, except now the kids have chosen which one they want to follow. And again, they're following the journaling process.
Part of the research that we're giving them, the different websites, they're going to have to make choices. So some of those websites are not going to be good websites. So it's one of those where they're really now at this point needing to make sure that they can differentiate between a good site and a site that is legitimate to use. Like Rebecca said, we're also wanting to make this easy for teachers. So there is an informative essay. It's a how-to essay. But if teachers want to, they can make this be their third trimester writing prompt. So the students can either answer the question, how can you create a water filtration system, or how can you create a Faraday flashlight? And we've made this follow the same standards and the same format as the writing prompts, so that the informative writing prompt, so that students can actually, it's a good fit. The rubric's the same rubric. The students should be able to, the teachers can use the same rubric. Once the students write their first draft, the teachers can correct it, grade it. They can use that then as their assessment for the third trimester, and then give the students an opportunity to go back and revise. So really teaching them that how important it is to revise and go back and check your work, that we never get it right the first time. We're always fixing what we've done. The students are then going to come together. So the informational writing is a individual activity. Each person has to do their own essay, but then they're going to collaborate and come back together and do a presentation. And their presentation will include Google Slides with Screencastify. And then they will be teaching an audience how to either build the filtration system or how to make the Faraday flashlight. So now they're having to use that technology piece again to present to other people and hopefully give them a little bit of the insights that they've learned.
We also have optional field trips built in. So field trips to wastewater treatment plants that are typically free or very low cost, that if somebody wanted to take a trip, they could get background information on how we actually filter our water. And we have rubrics that support each piece of the capstone, including a collaboration rubric that teachers can use with students. So for us, this is a 2-year process, and this is our first year of testing it out. So this is really our rough draft and run through with our students. And we know it's not going to be perfect, but it's kind of where we wanted to start, focusing on making sure students had choice, building in enough choice so that all schools could potentially use it if they wanted to. And then also making sure that students had that authentic experience of building something or something that was hands-on, that's a little bit different than the standard curriculum that they would go through, that they're actually applying what it is that they learned through their research. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rudolph, did you have more that you wanted to say?
Just real quick, because this is a district initiative, and one of the concerns when we started the capstone project was making sure that every kid would have the resources to do it. So the district is going to fund this project, including the kits at every single site.
Great. Clarifying questions, trustees?
Yeah, so I think this is outstanding. It looks very exciting and well thought out. Are you going to be offering this project to other fifth grade teams at different schools in the district?
Correct. So phase 2 is they are actually trying this year. Then we will look for volunteers next year at different sites. And then in the final year, after we make a couple more adjustments, it will go live.
So
Yes.
some schools will use this and others maybe will make up their own, or all schools will use this?
So the idea here is that just like when we start working on the 8th grade capstone, we will have a series of projects so if we can create more choice, we will. But with the first iteration of this, we will be using this as the guiding point. And I think that, again, just like you said, the work that they've done is excellent. And the fact that they've woven in so many things from reading all the way down to science standards, and the design thinking process is pretty amazing. I think the fact that they were the ones that created it, we're going to let them present it to other 5th grade teachers.
And I had a question that I may have missed. This obviously takes place over some time. Is it kind of in a concentrated chunk over like the last 6 weeks, or does it, I'm just curious what the timeline is.
So we were trying to build in as much flexibility because everyone's end of the school year looks different. So we have it mapped out where it's mapped out by days and how much time we think it's going to take. Teachers can choose to collapse it or expand it depending on how much time they have. But we're doing the rough run through at the end of this year. So we'll have more of an idea of how long it takes.
So like after testing is done?
Definitely
Ideally.
after testing is done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other clarifying? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and the idea here when we started the 5th grade capstone was that it would take place during the 5th grade experience. So if a school decides to do it a little bit earlier, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you. Any members of the public wishing to comment? Okay, other questions or comments, trustees?
I just think this is wonderful. I was taking so many notes on this. The process was thoughtful. I love that it's portable. We're supporting it at the district level at all sites once it's a full rollout. And I love the tactile part of it, the kinetic learning aspect. I think that's a really neat piece that can capture some people and kids sometimes we miss. So thank you. And it was a really nice presentation.
And I just wanted to say also, I love the writing rubric. I mean, in the time that my children were at our schools, I never saw anything like this. I first started seeing rubrics like this when they got to high school and took like AP Comp. And then now my younger guy just finished his first year of college, and he had an essay that he still needed to turn in electronically. He was working on furiously the day after he got home, and he had something very much like that rubric. And so I think this is a great way to get them started, and it will serve them well throughout their academic careers and hopefully, when they get out into the professional world too. So thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the Seamless Summer Feeding Program for 2018. Dr. Clark?
Good evening. I'm just going to introduce our Director of Food Service, Debbie Austin, who will give a short presentation about the Seamless Summer Program for 18. And then I'll probably follow up at the very end after she's finished. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Summer Seamless Program and some of the things that we did last summer and some of the things we're going to do this summer. What is Seamless Summer? The Seamless Summer Program allows school districts to ensure that students in a district are fed during the summer months when school's not in session. Summer 2017, last summer, we served over 60,000 of our students in Mountain View. As we end this school year, there's approximately 1,895 students, or 37% in Mountain View, who qualify for the National Free Reduced Price Meal Program. The Seamless Summer Program is open to any and all individuals that are from 0 to 18 years of age. Some of the highlights. The district will provide breakfast and a lunch program to the students who attend the district's summer school program. This year, it's at Crittenden Middle School from June 11th through July 6th. Stretch to Kindergarten will be at Graham from June 11th through July 20th. All sites will be closed for the holiday. Working in concert with various community entities, including the Second Harvest Food Bank, who has been very supportive of us, the district will serve lunch to community members who qualify. We will serve from June 4th through August 10th. The site will be closed again for the holiday. And that location will be at Crittenden Middle School. It is an open site. From June 11th through August 10th, all sites will be closed again on the holiday. The locations are the Mountain View Library, Rangsdorf Park Pool, and other sites to be determined. We're working on that now with the CDE. Distribution sites. The multi-use room at Crittenden Middle School will provide breakfast to our summer school students. And we, because of the size of the amount of students we're feeding this year, we're probably going to run breakfast for approximately 2 to 2.5 hours. Then it will be open to provide summer seamless program to all children in attendance for lunch. The district will provide meals also at the Mountain View Library, Rangsdorf Park, away from the construction around the pool area, and other various community locations to be determined. Also, the district will provide meals for other local agencies to distribute to their program students and children, such as Park and Rec, Mountain View Police Department, and the Mayview Children's Clinic. This year, we're also going to have a mobile feeding piece. The district will serve lunch at multiple sites in Mountain View from our truck. We're going to feed the Mountain View Public Library from 11 to 12, and we have a big barbecue on Tuesdays. Rangsdorf Park Pool from 12 to 2. We extended it because we noticed that a lot of the children don't get up and get into the parks until late. They don't. And then we're going to do mobile community meals. We're working on that now, which sites that will take care of, and that'll be from 11 until 2. And we're basically going to go to various areas of the city and take care of the children. They are basically latchkey children. This is sponsored in part by the Second Harvest Food Bank. We strive to reach all children that are hungry and that need a meal. Our next steps. We have to finalize locations of our mobile sites. We begin the talking to the community. We begin with a lot of publicity. So we're going to email parents. We're going to do robocalls. We're going to do newsletters, flyers in English and Spanish. We're going to do a press release, social media post, website, tweets, superintendent e-news, Mountain View Wisconsin School District org, and we're also probably going to approach Spanish radio. This is our advertising banner and signage. You will see this on our trucks. You will also see it posted at Crittenden Middle School. It will also be on our flyers. So when you see that, that's us. Thank you. Are there any questions?
So I asked this question in my question to Dr. Rudolph, but I think it's worth saying in public that the food truck is being, one reason we're able to provide the food truck is through the cooperation of the County of Santa Clara. Is that
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Any other questions, members of the public? Or I just want to say, keep up the great work. I'm really proud of this district and of your leadership for bringing all these meals that we've done last year, and looking forward to enhancing and expanding the program this summer.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just make a quick comment. Debbie is she's too quiet. She won't take any credit for it, but Debbie was instrumental in the food truck. She went for broke, asked for everything she wanted on the food truck. And if I remember correctly off the top of my head, Joe Simidian was very instrumental as well with the County Board of Supervisors. And the total cost of that truck is somewhere about $300,000. So it's a huge investment in the district, and working with Debbie and her staff of how we as a district can get out to serve the families in need. Thanks.
Kudos. Okay, the next item is yours, Dr. Clark, Capital Projects Program Update and Summer 2018 Projects Preview.
Thank you. So we are May 3rd, getting ready for the summer, ramping up. This year's construction will be quite dramatic around the community around Mountain View. So I wanted to give an update for the community and for the board about where we are and where we stand. So just as a reminder, Measure G passed in 2012 for 198 million. The COP, certificates of participation, was an additional 40 million. And those two sources of funding have allowed us to provide new construction, modernization, growth, the new school on Wissman, construction of a new both typical and special needs preschool on Montecito, and a new district office. So for us with projects, Montaloma, the MUR is complete. That's the courtyard out front or behind the MUR. These are brand new kitchens, and of course, Debbie's not here. Debbie, as the director of food service, was instrumental in designing the kitchens for the elementary schools. These are fantastic kitchens at our elementary schools. There are a lot of production kitchens that are not this nice, so it's quite good. So a lot of space and use. The new MUR for Montaloma, this was taken about a month or so ago. This is the very first breakfast, the very first day the MUR opened. The kids were out the door, pounding on the windows, open, open, open. So it was quite fun, but it was really dramatic. Moving forward, the Crittenden Track and Field and Trail Project. The trail and the track and field are not 100% complete, but at least the track and field are open and they're able for use. It was a great sight that first Saturday to see a lot of kids out on the field playing. The trail nearing completion. This is a trail that will connect Rock Street and Middlefield, the Creekside Trail, kind of on the backside of Crittenden. It is almost finished. Both the track and field and trail are anticipated to be done next Friday, May 11th. The next project is Castro Mistral. We are building the new school, the new elementary school of Castro, and Mistral and Castro will share the library and the MUR. This is an exterior of the library, the curved building. This is the new Castro Kindergarten Plaza. It's interesting that they're still doing a lot of construction, but the play structure is already up. The prices for the play structures were going up on January 1, so the contractor ordered them early. What are you going to do? Instead of leave them in storage, go ahead and install them. So they're up. Those are the 3 kindergarten classrooms. Moving forward to Buff Hub and Landals. Bub's MUR, the Bub inside. They're pretty large, 5,800 square feet. They'll seat 225 students for lunch, 450 students for an assembly. It's on pause now. There's Landals. Landals, Bub, and Huff all have the same contractor. They have the same inspector. DSA, the Division of State Architect, would not allow us to stay on the same schedule for each school. So we had to pick 1, 2, 3. Huff has always been in first place. Bub was in second, and then Landals was in third. And then for whatever reason, over the last few months, Landals has stepped up into second place and Bub was in third. But they all will be done in late June, early July, and ready for the school year to start. So that's the exterior of Landals. The inside, you can see that it's a little further ahead than Bub was. And then you get to Huff, you can actually see the exterior of the MUR. There you go. So there's Huff. That's pretty much a finish. There's still work to be done on the canopy that goes over the door. That large space in front will be a kind of a plaza, a courtyard. 3 to 5 trees, depending on the space that we have at each school, will be planted. So it'll be a nice connection between the MUR and the existing buildings that we have on that campus. The inside, though, getting closer and closer to being finished. Stevenson, well, it's a big pile of dirt sometimes, but and it has been for months. But they're actually making tremendous progress in the last couple of months. If you drive by, they're bringing more and more of the modular buildings on site. Building D, Building B, the 2 long buildings on both sides of the campus are both in. And tomorrow they actually crane in, and Dr. Westover has already left, but tomorrow they crane in Building C tomorrow. And so all the classroom buildings will be in place except for the kindergarten, which is up along the front of San Pierre with the admin building. And those will go in hopefully in the next month, end of May, early June. So summer of 18, those are projects in place, but summer of 18, to give you where we're headed, the city has confirmed that they will replace the synthetic turf at Graham. And you can see the schedule. So this is the last project. The Courtyard Plaza is the last project for Graham for the district. We tried to do it in summer of 17. We didn't receive any bids. We received one bid, and board may recall that we received one bid. It was $100,000 over budget. We have value engineered as much as we can at the moment. We got another $60,000 back. So we're just under, 500,000, 490-ish. And the hope is that when they take out the concrete, the base rock underneath will be in good enough shape, we'll be able to leave it. And that will actually get us back to that 450 budget, but no promises on that one. Castro Mistral for summer. Castro New School will be finished. The new shared MUR and libraries will be complete as well. The temporary office for Castro Mistral, they're actually going to go into one of the preschool rooms for that first week, June 4th to June 8th, to finish the school year. Because one of the very first things for the Castro Mistral office is to turn it into the Mistral office. We are hoping that we have to go ahead and move people out, and we might be able to start some demolition of that building before we get DSA approval. The frontage of Mistral will be finished over the summer. We're going to rip out, make a connection when you come in the horseshoe loop off of Escuela. You'll be able to go all the way down to the very end next to the MUR. So we'll extend and expand the traffic loop for the new Mistral. The kindergarten building for Mistral is delayed until the fall of 18. So not to point fingers at anyone, but DSA has been a real challenge this spring. Working with the principal of Mistral, we've been able to accommodate not having the kindergarten classrooms to start the school year, and it was a really good solution. So I was very happy, and Marcella was very flexible. The flex room, the flex room building itself may be delayed to the fall of 18, possibly November. We're not quite sure. If we don't get out of DSA and we can't guarantee that space will be done, that one might be delayed. The one that we're most concerned about is the Mistral office itself may be delayed until summer of 19. Again, DSA. The date that we have right now is June 10th. If we do not get out of DSA by June 10th, we'll have to delay the Mistral office building until summer of 19. And the idea is that we can't guarantee that it will be ready for school to start. You don't have classrooms coming on a campus you can accommodate. Kids can go into another room. You can use flex rooms that maybe we're going to have another purpose, but you don't have an office. That would be very tough to move to a temporary location. For the full campus is closed for the summer. Part of the big project this year is for the summer is to remove the mobile modulars, the brown buildings that are out on the field, to remove them, replace the asphalt, install the brand new basketball court and play structure for Castro and Mistral, and then also to resod that area. And so, but we hope the new Castro campus will be accessible for everyone come August 1. Monte Loma admin building and staff room buildings have a modernization. The big project that will be noticed to most people driving by is the roof replacement. The turquoise teal color will be gone. For a lot of Monte Loma, there's a lot of dry rot, which we discovered last year when we were doing the modernization. So there'll be a lot of repairs, a lot of rebuilding. The canopies that come down over the toilet buildings, so that kind of the building itself pitches up, but they have a canopy that goes into a V and it makes it very kind of dark and shadowy. Those will be removed and will just be extended out to match the roof line. So there will be a very dramatic look to Monte Loma itself when it's completely done. The school campus will be closed for the summer as they're doing a lot of metal roof. Not very safe at all for anyone to be walking around. But the field will be open. The grass field and softball field will be fenced off, and so the public will be able to access that side. The temporary office for Monte Loma will be in the community room, which is at the very front of the front of the MUR at Monte Loma. Bub Huff and Landals, major modernization. The admin buildings, every single classroom will be done. Also, they'll start work converting the existing MUR building into the brand new library and special day classrooms. And those rooms will not be done until December of 18. But the classrooms, the school office, those will be done and ready for school to start. The fields will be open at all three schools, Huff, Bub, and Landals from the backside of the campus. You will not be able to get to it from the road, from the streets that you might walk into the front parking lot, because both Landals and Huff are having their parking lots shifted, redone. Traffic flow will be very different, be markers, lanes. So hopefully traffic will improve at both Huff and Landals. The temporary office, when I typed this, was to be determined, and that was confirmed today that Huff, Bub, and Landals temporary offices for June 4th through the 8th will be at Graham. We're actually going to take over a room here at Graham for that first week. So if anyone in the community, anyone has business at Huff, Bub, and Landals for that first week, June 4th to June 8th to end the school year, it'll be here at Graham. We'll put a big sign at the school sites to tell everyone to come to Graham. I will also say at Huff, Bub, and Landals, the end line that goes along with Stevenson and Therakoff is these are full-scale modernization of every single classroom on campus. That's a lot of stuff to store for the summer. So between mid and late May at Huff, Bub, Landals, and also Therakoff, there'll be somewhere between 10 and 15 storage containers delivered to the school sites. It will not be pretty. It will be totally inconvenient. You will hate it, but it's a necessary evil. And we can't have them all delivered on, boy, that Texas came out, didn't it? So we can't have all the storage containers delivered on May 31st because the movers are coming June 1st at 1 o'clock. So with the companies that we have 3 different storage container companies delivering storage containers. They'll get delivered. We're taking over parking lots, the side of the building. They're just going to be everywhere. The front parking lot at Therakoff on San Luis will be completely taken over by storage containers. As I told the staff, parking will be a real challenge. But you'll get your steps in for that last week, couple weeks of school. It'll be great. Also for Landals, it will have a significant impact to the school site because Landals were doing their parking lot over the summer, so we can't use the front parking lot for storage containers. So there will be some storage containers actually on the blacktop on the playground for those last couple of weeks. But Principal Steve Chesley, very flexible, very open idea where they're going to make it work, which is I have no doubt. Stevenson and Therakoff, we've talked about Stevenson already, the full school. The Stevenson's MUR is now not going to be completed until January of 19. Again, I won't poke any fingers, or point fingers. The grass field will be open. The Stevenson Therakoff grass field will be open, but the city is trying to do their toilet building during the summer as well, because it's interior of a school campus. So it's very hard for them to get in to do that work during school year. They're also doing the Monte Loma, they're also doing Crittenden, but they can easily block that off during a school year where kids can't get there. But Stevenson was a tough one, so they're actually going to come in and do the toilet building during the summer as well. But the grass field should be available. The Therakoff temporary office for June 4th through the 8th is in the Therakoff Library Community Room. It's right there at the front parking lot. So you'll have to go around for that first week, and then storage containers are coming. So here's the new school on North Wisman. The very first step, this was the groundbreaking. The site grading is getting started. The very first thing was to put up temporary fencing. They took down the trees that are making way for the new driveway entrance, the new driveway exit, and then also the kindergarten building. By the way, the brown thing up in the air is not a bush, that's actually dirt flying through the air, courtesy of board member Coladinato. I wasn't purposely trying to capture dirt in action, but it worked out. So. The district office, Stevenson is in their temporary campus. They move on July 2nd. On that Monday, July 2nd, they will be moving into their new campus. It will not be finished, but we're going to move them there for storage because we have to get the district office out of the current location. So the district office will move into the temporary campus July 9th, July 16th, somewhere in that week, and then we'll start construction on the district office. And then there will be a few days over the course of the summer when we're moving in because we have to pack the district office, move out the district office, and then move the cubicles over, the workstations over to the new campus, get set up, get unpacked. There may be a few days over the summer where the district office itself is closed for moving, but we're trying to avoid that as best we can. And then that was the project, the budget. The budget allocation summary, we are actually doing really well. I won't expect you to read that, but here's the summary page. So the total revenue, the total projected expenditures, which includes everything on the budget allocation summary. We have a deficit of $345,000, which out of essentially a $260 million program, I think that's pretty good. Of our $9.9 million contingency sitting aside waiting for future projects, we still have over $9.5 million waiting. And we are getting really close to the very last bid project where we'll have a really good idea of what's left essentially in the program budget and for us moving forward. Just to want to point out, last year's summer construction, when we thought we were all busy, we only did $29 million worth of work. This summer, we're projecting $56 million worth of work. So every school will have some construction except Crittenden is the lucky school who gets the summer school program for the summer. So, next steps, keep pushing to get us through to get ready for the summer. There's a lot of coordination going on as we ramp up, a lot of move meetings, a lot of conversation with the principals, getting ready, the contractors, getting everything signed up. And then of course, the work itself. And then we'll come back in August or September and give an update on how we went for the summer. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Any clarifying questions, trustees? Trustee Gutierrez?
Dr. Clark, thank you so much for your help. A few years back, we were sort of wondering how's this going to work out. In the end, it looks like it's with your diligence and Dr. Rudolph's persistence, it's looking very good across the district as a whole, which is great. My question for you, though, is in the end, if there is extra money left over, what happens to that money?
So it's a great question. So if you go back to the BAS, which doesn't matter if you look at the BAS page, there's like kind of a pink peachy line at the very bottom. And we talk about, and these are projects for the future with unfunded scope. And so we've been keeping track over the course of the, thank you. At the very bottom section, you see what kind of below that pink line, which I wouldn't expect the audience
It's
to be
page
able to read that.
503 in the board packet.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
So
about this.
those are projects that have unfunded scope. It's projects that have been sitting there waiting, things that have come up. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we could? One of the projects that's on here is the portable refresh project. So we know that we're keeping some portables in the district. They need a little attention, a little love, but we didn't want to spend money on portables until we knew where we were. So we have working with Todd Lee and Jason Cave of Greystone West, our program management company. We've been able to put a really rough estimate. And so you'll see prices on there. Oh, thank you. So thanks, Kathy. Where you can see the prices up there of those projects or the cost, estimated cost. So as we get closer and closer and we start looking at, well, what are we going to do in summer of 19? Because it'll be like a vacation after this summer.
Right.
But it's interesting is we have our program meetings on Thursday and Todd and I were talking. He goes, we really should start to look at what we're going to be doing in summer of 19 because DSA, again, no pointing fingers, you want to get in earlier if you have a project that is you can only do in the summer. And a portable refresh project is a great example. We have programs, we have kids, flex rooms, after school programs, and those portables, we can't take them during a school year. So it needs to be a summer. But that's not official. That's everything below the line. That will have to come back to the board for the board to say, yes, we'd like to do that project. Nope, not yet. Don't move it. And then as we continue on through the program itself, money, we see the remaining balance, we'll get to where we just keep spending it all.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Members of the public, did anyone have any questions or comments they wanted to make on this item? Trustees, any further comments?
Dr. Clark, thank you for bringing it all together and having the trains run on time and on budget.
Hear, hear.
I'll accept 50% of that gratitude, but it's a group. Not everything's on time, which is frustrating, but thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, do we want to take a short break, 5-minute break? So at 8:01, we'll go on break and we'll come back at like 8:06. You had to slip away for work.
It says 20.
It's not gonna take long.
Okay.
You're in it for the last marathon.
I know, I took a break right before said on your march, get set.
Oh, yeah, just over there. Yeah. Maybe January, maybe June. We have our little workshop. This is how far apart. Or you want to do it?
No.
Oh, but you're next.
But I'm next,
Oh.
and I'm gonna have to log in.
Oh, yeah.
So
So I can use that.
you can't, because it wasn't working. She was pushing for you. So she would watch when you would do this.
Oh, then I should have made a signal or something. I kept doing this one.
She was over there. She was looking at you like.
Next.
Oh.
Next. When I'm waiting on
What I was hoping
keep
for.
talking.
Yeah, it was fun. That's what I do. Yeah.
Where is that? Sicilia. Piccola del Norte.
I know.
Piccolo Donati. Piccolo Donati. How fun. It's supposed to be beautiful. Is that part of your trip?
2 weeks from now.
Because I knew you were going to Venice. I didn't realize you were going to Sicily too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Venice and where? Oh.
Okay. 8:06, the meeting is called back to order. And Dr. Rudolph, you are on, I believe. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Clark. I'm looking the wrong. Excuse me. On the summary presentation of the recent solar feasibility studies for review and direction.
Oh, sorry. Pick this up to use again. Have it. Great, thank you. So I'm for the last few, it's been going on for months. We've had 3 presentations for the solar feasibility studies in the district. So we thought we would bring it back as a summary of the 3 and ask the board for next steps or give us direction for next steps. So one of the things was using solar power in the school district. The strategic plan states the district will maintain a balanced general fund. Solar energy can potentially provide a savings to the district's electricity bill. So for us, the studies themselves, there were 3, Climatech, NG, and also Sage Renewables. very similar, Climatech using solar carport, shade structures, possible roofs, HVAC windows, building automation systems. Estimated a district could save approximately $670,000 a year. NG presented recently, and with solar carports, shade structures, possible roof applications, estimated approximately $500,000 a year. And then Sage Renewables came also almost a very similar structure, no pun intended. Solar carport, shade structures, possible roof applications for approximately $470,000. Those three entities doing the work that they did as a solar feasibility, their savings is based on what they're proposing you could do, and then what we as a district had full implementation. Some of their numbers are coming from putting, I'm making this up and being very general, putting a shade structure on every single school in every single location possible to generate the maximum amount. We as a district may not decide to do that if we chose to do solar in the district. We might have some schools who have certain things, but not all solar at all sites. So this amount of savings would fluctuate. So the potential impact for us as a school district, the potential impact could be quite significant to the general fund, saving $500,000, $600,000 a year of our electricity bill. General concern is that there are sometimes estimated savings are not realized. Depending on the financial model selected, it could be whether it's a purchase, whether it's a power purchase agreement, whether it's a loan of some sort, you may not be able to recognize the savings that are projected or estimated in some type of a proposal. So for us, for next steps, with the board direction, the next step for us is to seek legal guidance to explore a financing model that we feel comfortable with. Also to put out a request for proposals. I'm looking for some type of a design, including the anticipated amount of savings in each year, and then approval of that design, and then the installation of a solar solution. Rough timeline working could be potentially the summer of 19. DSA, it's funny how now they're in some other presentation. DSA actually has already approved shade structures and carports. And so sometimes you can accelerate that process going through that structure or going through that approval process. So we could look at summer of 19. Also, some of those structures can be done during the school year, so we don't necessarily have to do them in the summer. So staff is recommending that we pursue. You have three different entities who presented three different studies that all were very positive and could have a significant impact on the district. So staff's recommending that we take the next steps to look for, to go out with, find our attorney to look for a financing model, and then also to do a request for proposals to find some vendor or some company to help us out. Thanks.
Clarifying questions, trustees?
Yeah, so it's unclear to me, in every other bid description that you've shown us for the last couple of years, the requirement has always been that we have to go with the cheapest bid given by a respected company. So, we've got three companies up there. I think they're all respected and they all have different price ranges. So it's unclear to me, what flexibility we have regarding selecting one over the other.
So just a reminder, the three amounts that we had, they were all very kind of cursory reviews of the district. And not to pick on two of them, but let's just say Sage and Climatech were very different. Sage Renewables was looking at, solar panels on a roof, shade structure, and canopies. Climatech went to the next step and did those along with changing out our HVAC systems, our heating and air conditioning systems, changing out windows. They had a much more substantial program that they costed out for us. When we actually put together the request for proposal, we can actually list out exactly what we want. And part of that will be for that company to come and do a more comprehensive feasibility study for us to do. At the end of the day, I'm going to hold this in question to get the attorney, but I think this is a specialty construction project. It's not a typical building construction, and there's some leeway about which one you can pick, and it's the idea of what's the best fit for the district and for our needs. I believe it's in that ballpark of like a lease back setup, but not a lease back.
And I have one more question. I had asked this the first time this came along, and it still, niggles at the back of my brain. I know it's difficult to make plans regarding the federal government, but in the last 6 months or so, there have been cuts in solar funding, and there have been, tariff war for steel. So, I wonder how much, we can make plans regarding any price estimates.
So there's some structures you can get. You're absolutely right. So the rebates and all the tax credits and stuff for the solar panels are starting to decline and starting to go away, even in California. With the steel tariffs that are being enacted, the prices are starting going up. It's really funny. We got a quote recently, and there was a tariff surcharge added to the bottom of the invoice. So things are starting to change. That would be part of the proposal. At the end of the day, you're going to say, come to a feasibility study and then propose what you could do for the district and estimate those savings for us. There are some structures where they will guarantee those savings, and that might be something the board and the district would like to put into the document itself. We're estimating you'll save X amount of dollars, and we will guarantee that you will save at least some certain amount. We could build that into the structure, or we can definitely ask if it's possible.
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this topic? Any other comments, trustees, or questions? Well, I just have one. What was shown in the presentation was just estimated savings from the different proposals, but none of these was really a bid. They were all just studies estimating potential savings.
Absolutely.
But as I recall, they didn't have the cost built into them. So the step now is to figure out which elements we want, and then we would bid that out, and it would look like a more traditional process that we're used to seeing for the construction of the classrooms.
Absolutely. So you could look at the idea that these were very simple feasibility studies, very high level, based on your electricity bill, based on what size of a solar panel we can install, what it will generate, what that savings would be, in the cost of that. This is your estimated savings over the year. These were really high level. If we want to pursue the idea, now the next step is to get into working with our attorney in the financing model, but also to go out and find someone to actually propose. So we're going to come down, do a real study, and show you this is detailed. We did this in a prior district of mine, and the book is this big, because they go site by site by site, and the kilowatt hours that are generated by this certain time of the day, when you can come back, the rates that we pay for PG&E, off-peak, on-peak, right?
And do we do that in tandem? Because as I recall, we were talking about you could do a bond, you could do a certificate of participation, you could do it out of, general reserves, but in reliance on the savings to offset some of that. So do we do the financing model first, or do we do the RFP, or are they kind of in tandem?
They're kind of in tandem. You're doing them at the same time, because that RFP itself, the proposal is just how they're going to do solar or not, or whatever they're suggesting for energy efficiency in general.
Okay.
Maybe they all want to recommend how we do efficiency. Maybe our windows need to all be replaced. So it's a different story. But if we're just going to pursue solar, we could be doing with the attorney and the financing option at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Well, I, for one, am very interested in pursuing this, and I liked the fact that we may have up to, I don't know how many $1 million left over. I know that the money from the bond has a variety of potential places it could go, but I'm very intrigued. And, even if we don't achieve any cost savings, being green to me has, that in and of itself is a benefit. So even if it's not a financial benefit, I think there's a long-term benefit. That's my view. I don't know how the rest of you feel.
I would agree. Well, I'm an environmental scientist, so this is right up my alley. It's just lacking having any real estimate on like the cost and cost structure. It's really hard to say, oh, well, here's the savings amounts versus what it would actually cost. So I would really like to pursue it further so we could see some of that additional information. Oops. I think I'm on. I'm just not talking into it.
Thank you.
It would be really great to see that additional information to make a more informed decision, but I think this is really something that we should be pursuing as a district. So thank you.
Sure. So I think I liked the presentations at first because it was like a teaser. It gives you it gives you like a trailer, right? It gives you okay, this is what you could see. So now by going to this next step, then we get the more detailed version of what all that means, which is good.
So are you calling me the end credits?
No, you're the
Oh,
beginning. You're the
Oh,
beginning.
okay.
So, but the reality is, I think that once you start to look at these issues, then that's when you start to modernize the district, and that's when we raise our standards. So as we do the construction projects, we finalize Measure G expenditures, and then we move on to this next step. It seems logical to do it now. And having said that, I don't know if there's anything else that we could think of that would help us make a best choice. But I'm sure that once we get the final presentations from whoever submits their RFPs, that's when we'll see what the potential cost savings would be.
Right.
But just to bring the school to that standard in all our school sites is a wonderful thought. And to make that happen, I think would be even better.
Okay.
So.
I'd like to proceed and authorize you guys to find out what the financing would be for these and bring back specific proposals.
Community comments.
I thought we already did community comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I thought we had already opened this up for community comments. Were there any members of the community that wanted to speak? No. Thank you. We do appreciate that many of you are interested in this topic. So thank you. I think we're moving along then. This time it's Dr. Rudolph, and we are ready to speak about potential grandfathering of students after boundary changes in 2019 and 2020.
It is. So bear with me for a second. We should have Tony on the line, so we're going to test it out. He says he can hear us. We want to make sure that we can hear him.
Will you remind us who Tony is for those of us in
So
the dark?
Tony Ferruzzo is our demographer. And Tony, you want to go ahead and talk so we can test the sound? It's not on.
Tony.
No, but I'll find out where the microphone is and we'll figure it out. Just keep talking.
Bottom left is
I wish I could be there.
You can hear him somewhere. It's mute on the lower left-hand corner of the screen.
Hold on, Tony, hold on one second. Hey, so he can hear us. Tony, give me control of the computer again. Thanks. We're gonna go to AirPlay.
Yeah, I'll just take a moment. I'm guessing that there will be community members wishing to speak on this comment, on this topic. So to the extent you haven't submitted your yellow card, speaker cards yet, if you would do that during Dr. Rudolph's presentation, that'd be great.
All right, Tony, let's try this again. Go ahead and take control. You do not. Hold on one second.
Part of Silicon Valley. Because that's
We may just have to go ahead and move forward, huh?
Tony, go ahead and talk again. If not, I'll just call you. No. It's not. So let me let me call you. You want me to call you on your cell phone? All right. You can go ahead and take the computer. I'm going to call you. We're going to hope this is loud enough. Just testing out, Tony.
Set my audio on. Okay, can you hear me on the phone now?
Yes. Yep.
They can. So let me cue you up, and then we'll get going from there.
Okay.
So we are coming to you today to talk about grandfathering. I know we had a presentation that was in there, but because we have Tony on the line, we're going to deviate from that because he's actually going to go through all of this information. The first thing I want to say is that you should have some data sheets in front of you. He's going to be referring to those. The individuals that are here, we actually have copies of the data sheets over there so that you can pick those up. These sheets are also on our website, as well as a video sort of explaining some of the data points that are up. So that's the first part. The second part is that we actually, originally when we started down this journey, we actually wanted the Enrollments Priorities Task Force to provide a recommendation for grandfathering. After the last meeting, Mrs. Geisels, as well as myself, did some reflection about where we were. And what we notice is that this topic is one that is a little bit beyond the scope of what the task force needs to deal with, and that we really felt like it would be best to bring this to the board to discuss grandfathering. We're not talking about the actual priorities. The task force will continue to work on those. We're simply talking about the discussion about grandfathering. The reason why I say this is that at the last meeting, we actually had a power outage, but that meeting ended up being what was supposed to be a 20 to 30-minute discussion and getting feedback from focus groups turned into a 2-hour discussion about grandfathering, and the EPTF was unable to move forward to discuss anything else. And so we really feel like, Ms. Geisels as well as myself, that this is it's too complex of an issue, and that we want to make sure that all of this information is out there. And really, at the end of the day, who gets grandfathered is a decision that the board of trustees will make. So let me describe how this process will work. Our goal today is to have Tony go through and present a lot of different pieces of information for you. After that, we know that there are going to be additional questions that you're going to have or other data points that you're going to want. Unfortunately, he will not be able to join us on the 17th. He is actually going to be presenting in Chicago for Chicago Public Schools. So we will answer those questions, and then from there, we will start listening to guidance that you provide. If there are additional questions from there, we'll check his availability to see if he can join us on the 31st meeting. At the 31st, our goal is to bring a recommendation based off of what we've heard from Board of Trustees about sort of where you're leaning, and then allow you to debate that and discuss that and make adjustments. From there, if there are adjustments that need to be made after listening to you, we'll bring it back on the 14th with the goal of getting a vote. We also, on the 31st, will be bringing the Enrollment Priorities Task Force recommendations to you. And we will be discussing, although this is a tangential item, we'll be talking about attendance verification. We did a poll because we know that topic keeps coming up. So Ms. Geisels and her team have already assessed what other school districts around us do. So we'll be talking about how that's going to look because the attendance verification will go into full force in the 1920 school year when the enrollment priorities change. Okay? All right, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Tony. And if we have any troubles with communication, I'll act as the buffer. You're up, Tony.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Well, good evening, Board President Blakely, board members, Dr. Rudolph and staff. Thank you for allowing me to do the presentation in this fashion. Hopefully the information will be clear, but it is complicated. So the questions that were asked, but I'm letting you know something that I did with the audio just now. I had the audio of the room in one ear and my phone in the other. And I'm now connected just with the phone because I was hearing my own echo. So hopefully, if there are questions, I'll be able to hear Dr. Rudolph and be able to answer any questions. The information that you see in front of us basically came from Dr. Rudolph through the committee, asking some questions or basically making some statements that are the basis of the data that I'm going to be sharing with you. So kids transitioning out of school due to intra-district transfers returning to home attendance area schools, number one. Item two are kids, students that are transferring back into a school due to intra-district transfers returning to home attendance school. Item three are the number of students transferring out of a school due to changing attendance areas. So this is the one that really narrows the focus to the areas that are in transition as opposed to looking at the entire number of students in each new boundary. This number should take into account that not all students in transitioning attendance currently attend their home school. The first thing I'm going to share with you is what the committee has called a complete reset. So if we were to look at every student in every new boundary who may be on an intra-district transfer, what do those numbers look like if they were to return to their home school? I'll show it by kindergarten through third grade, because those are the students that will be impacted by the change that occurs in 2019. Then we'll look at the number of younger siblings for the 2019-2020 fourth and fifth graders, who are your current second and third graders for each school. And we'll also look at the younger siblings of just fifth graders, who are your current third graders for each school.
This slide is not in our presentation, correct? It's not in the package that we received ahead of time?
No, those were questions that actually came from the Enrollment Priorities Task Force, which is the basis of where this data came from.
It would be helpful to have that in the package next time.
Now. I mean, not now, but I mean, after tonight's meeting, send it to us.
You're talking about the questions that they asked?
That,
Yeah, I was trying to process that and it was hard. Maybe I'm a visual person.
Okay, he's actually going to take you through
Okay,
all this.
thank you.
But we'll get it to you.
Ready for me to go?
We are. Keep going.
Okay. So the first spreadsheet you're looking at is the total reset. It's the transition of students to new boundaries, regardless of the small areas that would be transitioning from one boundary to another. I've tried to label each column really carefully here because this data can be confusing. So let me go ahead and explain each of the columns and the data they represent. The schools that are listed here to the left are done so in the context of their new boundaries, not in their current boundaries. So when we look in this first column and we have a title of the number of K-3 students who reside in this school's 2019 boundary, there are 319 students that currently reside in Bub's new boundary, K-3. 335 K-3 students who currently reside in Castro's new boundary, 348 in Huff's new boundary, 402, 293, 339, and 320 in each of the new boundaries.
Hold on 1 second, Tony.
Sure. Okay.
The reason why we looked at K-3 is because these are the students that our current third graders will be the fifth graders in the 2019-20 school year. So we're looking at any kid that is currently enrolled in the district that will be impacted by this. You're up.
In the next column that's highlighted, we're looking at the K3 students currently attending Mistral. So this tells us that there are 16 students who are attending Mistral, K3, but live in Bub's new attendance area. 101 students who are currently attending Mistral who live in Castro's new attendance area. And so on down the column. 7 that live in Huff's attendance area, 61 in Landell's, 33 in Montaloma, 24 in Slater, and 37 in Torkoff. When you go to the next column, it's the same information, but it's for Stevenson. So there are currently 9 K3 students attending Stevenson who live in the Bub attendance area, the new attendance area. And then on down for the rest of the students who reside in these new attendance areas but currently attend Stevenson. The third column over merely adds up the total number of Mistral and Stevenson students for each of the new boundaries. So there are 25 Mistral and Stevenson students who are living inside Bub's new attendance area. This next column is a shift in, it's the number of K3 students currently attending Bub. So all of the students that you see in this column are K3 students currently attending Bub. And this tells you which new boundary they are actually residing in. This highlighted number of 266 tells it that there are 266 K3 students currently attending Bub who also reside in Bub's new attendance area. And I've highlighted this diagonal because you can look at this very quickly and see how many students are currently attending Castro, for example, and already live in Castro's new boundary. K3 students currently attending Huff that already live in Huff's new boundary. The same thing for Landell's, Montaloma. There are no students at Slater yet. And the same thing for Thorkoff. There are 107 K3 students currently attending Thorkoff that reside in the new Thorkoff attendance area. Now, as we continue down each column, keep in mind that we're looking at the K3 students currently attending Bub. So 13 students currently attending Bub reside in Castro's new boundary. 11 currently attending Bub reside in Huff's new boundary. You see the largest number are the 82 that are currently attending Bub that will reside in Landell's boundary. Same thing for the last 3 rows. So the 392 represents the total number of K3 students currently attending Bub. Now the same holds true as we go to each column to the right. We're now looking at the K3 students currently attending Castro. 8 of those students currently attending Castro reside in Bub's new attendance area. As I mentioned, the 132 attending Castro already live in Castro's new boundary. And then as you go down the column, you're looking at current Castro students and which boundary they will reside in 2019. The same goes for Huff, for Landell's, Montaloma, and of course Slater doesn't have students yet, and for Thorkoff. When we go to the far right, this 28 represents the number of students that would transition to a new home school if we did a total reset. So these are the students that currently reside in Bub's new attendance area, but attend these schools. The 83 are the number of students who would need to transition to their new home school, who are currently attending each of these schools by column, but live in Castro's new attendance area. So as you go down this column, you see that we get a total of 637 students that if we did a total reset, would need to transition from their current school to their new boundary. Before I go to this next set of data, are there any questions here?
Yes, the blue column on the far right, does that include, is this the hard reset? So it also includes Mistral and Stevenson, or are those students excluded?
They
Thank
are
you.
excluded.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a sum of only these numbers, not the 319, just these numbers. Same thing with the 83. It's the total of the white cells, excluding this total here.
All right, that's the only question. We're ready.
Okay. So when we go to the next set of data, now we're singling out grade 3 students, so that if you were to decide to grandfather grade 3 students on this total reset, the definition of each cell, of each column, of each row is the same as what I described in this set of data, except it limits the numbers to grade 3 only. So the number of grade 3 students who reside in this school's attendance area, new attendance area for Bub, for example, is 71. There'll be 71 grade 3 students residing inside Bub's new attendance area. 83 in Castro, 89 in Huff, etc. When we shift to the next columns for Mistral and Stevenson, these are the total number of grade 3 students currently attending Mistral, but reside in the new Bub attendance area. 2 from Stevenson, 4 altogether. So as you go down these other cells, you see the total number of students that are currently attending Mistral or Stevenson, but reside in the new boundaries to the left. Grade 3 only.
You got a question? Hold on.
Yes, so this is Ellen Tony. When you say grade 3, do you mean grade 3 this year or grade 3 in 2019?
So it's grade 3 this year who will be fifth graders
Fifth
in the 2019-2020 school year. So this is the fifth graders for that year when the school in Northwestman opens. We're ready.
Okay. So when we go to the next column, under the number of grade 3 students, and as Dr. Rudolph said, who'll be your fifth graders in 2019, that are currently attending Bub, 55 third graders currently attend Bub are already in Bub's new attendance area. And then the 9 attending Bub are in Castro's attendance area, 7, 21, etc. for the other schools, for a total of 96 students. Same definition for this next column. There are 4 grade 3 students who are currently attending Castro that will be residing in Bub's new attendance area. 35 currently attending Castro are already in Castro's new attendance area. So if we go through column by column, when you get over to the far right, you see the total number of grade 3 students who would need to be grandfathered, who would be living in Bub's new attendance area, but attending these schools currently. So the total number, as you go down the column, are 153 third graders who will be fifth graders in 2019 that would need to be grandfathered if the board were to make that decision. Any questions before I go to the next?
No, we're good.
Okay. So the last thing on the total reset that Dr. Rudolph asked for were how many K2 students were residing in each of these boundaries under the same definitions. So really all I did was I subtracted the 71, the grade 3 students, from the total K3 students and got the 248, for example. So all this spreadsheet does here is it subtracts the third graders from the K3 students and puts the total numbers here of students that would be remaining in each of those boundaries.
We don't have that. So do we have that slide?
We'll have to get that one.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to shift to a different spreadsheet unless we have any other questions here.
No, but Tony, send this updated spreadsheet to me. We have the one without the K through 2.
Oh, will do. My apologies.
No worries.
But basically, like, it would say, you just subtract, you take the top one and subtract, and then you get the rest. Okay, for each cell.
This next spreadsheet takes a very different look at the transition and grandfathering. If you'll notice the graphic to the right here, I have put numbers in each of the areas that are transitioning from one current boundary to the 2019 boundaries. And they're described at the top of each column. So for example, number 1 represents the area that is going to be transitioning from Huff to Bub. I'm sorry, I've shifted over here from the number 1 is shifting from, I knew that was wrong as soon as I said it, from Bub to Landell's. So this area right here is currently in Bub's attendance area, but would be transitioning to Landell's attendance area. So the numbers are going to only represent the children that live inside this polygon. And if I could just go ahead and describe each column as I go. The number 2 area, this small triangle, is associated with the second column, and it's the area that's transitioning from Huff to Bub. Area number 3 is transitioning from Huff to Slater. Number 4 is transitioning from Landell's to Slater. Number 5 is transitioning from Landell's to Thorkoff. 6 is transitioning from Montaloma to Castro. 7 is transitioning from Montaloma to Thorkoff. And finally, 8 is transitioning from Thorkoff to Slater. So as we then look at the data, set aside the other spreadsheet because I had to do this layout very differently in looking at these transition areas. So now I'm giving you a new definition on the list of school names here. School K3 students are currently attending are listed down this column. So this number of 76 are the number of K3 students currently residing in the Bub area, that transition area, transitioning to Landell's, that are currently attending Bub. So if I want to look at students that are currently attending Bub, I would go down this column here. So for example, in the transition area 2, there are 2 students who are in the area transitioning from Huff to Bub, and they're already attending Bub. I'm going to go down this column before I confuse all of us. If I stick with the number of students that are currently residing in this Bub area, so I'm talking about this Bub area right here, that's transitioning to Landell's, 76 are currently attending Bub. 11 of the students in that transition area are attending Castro. 2 of the students in that transition area are attending Huff. 6 are already attending Landell's. So this area here, there are 6 children that are already attending where that area is transitioning to. 1 is attending Montaloma, 4 Thorkoff, and then there are 20 students at Mistral and 13 at Stevenson. This 127 are the total number of students that are the K-3 students currently residing in the Bub area that will transition to Landells. 6 of them are already there. These 33 would not be transitioning. They are in the 127, and I really should have excluded them from this 127. So these 33 kids, I should have subtracted out of the 127. They won't be transferring as long as they continue to attend Miss Strauland Stevenson. So let me shift to the second column, and maybe this will become clearer as I go column to column. I'm now looking at area number 2. And area number 2 is a small triangle that is transitioning from Huff to Bub. There are 2 students that are currently residing in that area that already attend Bub. There are none attending Castro. 7 of the students that are in this Huff transition area to Bub are currently attending Huff. And the rest are attending Miss Strauland Stevenson. When I go to the area 3, I'm looking at number of K-3 students currently residing in Huff that will transition to Slater. So 1 student is transitioning, is currently living in, attending Bub Elementary School, but will transition to Slater. The largest number of 88 are the students residing in the Huff area transitioning to Slater that are currently attending Huff, which makes sense because this area is currently in Huff's attendance area and will transition to Slater. If I go to the next column, I'm now talking about area 4, which is this area here. Students currently residing in Landells that would transition to Slater. 7 are currently attending Bub. None are attending Castro. 2 are attending Huff. 82 are currently attending Landells. So these 82 students would transition from Landells to Slater. 1 from attending Montaloma, 6 at Thorkop, and then there are 44 who are currently attending Miss Strauland Stevenson. So this 143 is really 99 because I'd subtract this 44 students from the total. So then looking at Landells, that's transitioning to Thorkop, that's area number 5. We've got 2 students that are currently attending Bub, 1 that's currently attending Castro, 24 that are currently attending Landells that would be transitioning to Thorkop, 1 currently attending Montaloma, and 4 already attending Thorkop would be a part of that transition. They're already there. And then 8 are attending Miss Strauland Stevenson. Area number 6 is this area here that is transitioning from Montaloma to Castro. There are no Bub students. There are 4 students currently attending Castro that won't need to transition to Castro because they're already there. 4 are attending Landells that would need to transfer to Castro. 13 from Montaloma would be transitioning to Castro. So it's interesting that there's only 13 Montaloma students that actually be doing that transition. 1 from Thorkop, and then 13 are currently attending Miss Strauland Stevenson. And in area 7, which is transitioning from Montaloma to Thorkop, you see zeros in these first 3 rows. 3 students are currently attending Landells that would transition from Montaloma to from Landells to Thorkop. 21 are currently attending Montaloma, and they would transition to Thorkop. 1's already at Thorkop, and 7 are attending Stevenson. And then finally, in area 8, which is this area here that's transitioning from Thorkop to Slater, we have no students in those first 3 schools. 3 that are currently attending Landells that would transition to Thorkop. 21 that are currently attending Montaloma that would transition to Thorkop. 1 that's already attending Thorkoff, and 7 that are at Stevenson. Did I just skip back to a column? I did. I should have been going down this column. My apologies. So you have my complete sympathy if any of this data gets confusing. There are 33 students here that are currently attending Thorkoff that would transition to Slater. That's your largest number. 10 that are attending Mistral and Stevenson. So I hope I didn't confuse you with that column shift. Any questions for this area? Okay, hearing none. This next set of data has the exact same definition I went through for the area above. But again, we're singling out grade 3 students who would be your 5th graders in 2019. So if you decided to grandfather children in these transition areas, your numbers would look as they show here. You have 19 students that are currently attending Bub that would transition from Bub to Landell's. And if you grandfather them, they would remain at Bub. 1 that would remain at Castro, 1 at Huff, 1 at Thorkoff, and 6 that are already attending Mistral and Stevenson. So you have a total, and I'm going to subtract the 6 from 28 here. You have 22 students that would be grandfathered as part of the students in this grade 3. It'll be 5th graders in 2019. In this next column, we're looking at just 1 student that's in grade 3 that resides in Huff that is attending Bub. 3 that reside in Huff transitioning to Bub that are currently attending Huff, and no other students to address. In the area that's transitioning from Huff to Slater, you have 19 students, grade 3 students currently attending Huff that would transition to Slater or be grandfathered. And then 1 to Landell's, 1 to Montaloma, 4 to Thorkoff. 6 are currently attending Mistral and Stevenson. So if I subtract that 6 from 31, you've got 15 students that you'd be grandfathering. You know, yeah, okay.
25, yeah.
Grade 3 for Landell's area that will transition to Slater. You see what the numbers are?
It would be 25, not 6. What did you say, 16?
Yeah, it's 25.
Landell's to Thorkoff. You see what the numbers are? Montaloma to Castro. Montaloma to Thorkoff. And Thorkoff to Slater.
9.
Again, this last set of data is just subtracting the grade 3 students from the K3 students to see how many children are remaining that would be a part of the transition if you grandfathered the K3 students and only transitioned the K2 students. In addition to, and I should share this to be very clear, these numbers do not include. You have an incoming class, kindergarten class, in the fall of 2018 that are not in these numbers. We don't have those numbers yet. And you have a kindergarten class that would be transitioning in the fall of 2019 that are not in these numbers. I'm going to shift gears to siblings, the sibling numbers, unless I have any questions here.
Go ahead.
We ready to go?
Yep, we're ready. Keep going.
Okay. Before I go to the spreadsheet numbers, what I want to share with you is how I had to go through a process to, hang on one second, how I had to go through a process to get the next set of data for you. I've blacked out students' names here. In order to get information on how many siblings, how many students in grade 3 and in grade 2 and 3 had younger siblings, I had to actually pull up lists of students, sort them by grade level, highlight the third graders. So as you see these yellow highlights here, this is a third grader who's highlighted in yellow. And then I resorted by school, by last name, by grade level, and by address to try and gather kids who were of the same last name or same addresses who had younger siblings. So here's a sample where you had a grade 3 student who has a first grade sibling. Here's another third grade student who has a first grade sibling. This third grader did not have a sibling, neither did this one, neither did this one. This third grader had a kindergarten sibling. So I had to get the counts by going through each boundary and pulling up the K-3 students, sorting the third graders, highlighting them, resorting, and going through and counting how many kids had siblings, how many children had siblings at a lower grade level. So that's in essence how I was able to pull this data together. So I'm starting with grades 2 and 3. How many second and third graders have one or more siblings residing in each of the areas? I only did this data for the transition areas. I did not do it for the total reset. So know that in area 1 is a sample here. The grade 2 and 3 students with one or more siblings that are residing in Bub, transitioning to Landels, I found 12 students currently attending Bub who have a younger sibling currently attending Bub. So that 12 are the number of students who have siblings. If you add the siblings to it, it's 24. There was one student who's in this transition area of Bub to Landels who had a younger sibling, and they're currently attending Castro. One from Huff. And then I've got siblings down for Mistral and Stevenson who are in this number of 19, and it really shouldn't be. I shouldn't have put them in here. So there are 14 total students who are in this transition area of Bub to Landels who have siblings currently attending other schools. If you double that number, it's 28 if you include their siblings. So then as you go down from left to right, and I'd have to subtract out again the Mistral and Stevenson numbers, you see how many children have siblings who are set in second and third grade. So this is for 2 grade levels that have siblings. I did the same thing. And by the way, the highlighted items are kids that are already at the school they'd be transitioning to, so they're not in this total. I did the same thing for grade 3 only. If you were to decide...
Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Are we assuming that each student that has a sibling just has one that's younger?
You hear that, Tony?
No, I couldn't hear that, sorry.
The question is are we assuming that each kid that has a sibling just has one?
I wasn't assuming that, but that's the case.
With the numbers.
But take into consideration that, again, like I mentioned in the last spreadsheet, these numbers don't include incoming kindergartners for next year and for the year after when we do the transition. So there may be more siblings in here when you add 2 more kindergarten classes.
Thank you.
You're good. Keep going.
Okay. So this next set of data just singles out grade 3. If you were to say, we're grandfathering grade 3 and we're going to allow the siblings stay together, here are the numbers you're dealing with. You have 8 grade 3 students who have siblings at Bub. And if you didn't grandfather them and didn't allow their siblings to go with them, these 8 kids would go to Landels instead of remaining at Bub. 1 at Huff. These 2 at Mistral will obviously probably continue to go to Mistral. So your numbers greatly diminish when you look at grade 3 only. And if we subtract out Mistral and Stevenson out of these numbers as well. Double the numbers because we're talking about the grade 3 student and then their younger sibling.
So because each one just happens to have 1 sibling, that is 22 kids that would remain at, if you grandfather 5th grade plus their siblings, 22 kids would stay at Bub, even though they're in the transition zone to Landover.
You don't double it?
You're doubling, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at the total.
This is only counting the 5th graders.
I counted the total across all schools as 24, so that would be 48.
48 kids would be grandfathered.
I'm sorry, I was a step ahead.
Excluding that, we won't know if they have a younger sibling until next
Enrollment comes in.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to shift to a new spreadsheet?
Yep.
Okay. So the next set of data is just information that Dr. Rudolph asked for, and I think this is in response to some board questions. So I'm shifting to fall enrollment. This spreadsheet shows the number of students who currently attend your existing schools by grade level. So all of the numbers that we've been working with have not included the 4th and 5th graders, because when you go to the new boundaries, they'll already be in 6th and 7th grade. They'll be gone. So the numbers that I've been dealing with and putting in front of you are really just the K3. But this then gives you the current total enrollment for each of the schools, not based on new boundaries, but based on their current boundaries and and their current enrollment. I'm going to point out that these numbers include your SDC students, because I'm going to show you another spreadsheet that is going to be looking at the new boundary numbers, and they show geographic area numbers that don't include SDC students.
SCC being our special day classes, which are special ed, medically fragile, students with autism, emotionally disabled. These are kids that are placed at a specific school due to their individual education plan or their IEP. You're good, Tony.
Okay. So this next set of numbers, and I included a graphic here just to enforce or accentuate the fact that these numbers are from new boundaries. So what I'm giving you, and I've highlighted the year 2019 because these are the number of students that are in K3 in the new boundaries. I've given you 4th and 5th, even though they'll be gone in 2019. But the first 2 cells here show you the number of K1 students that Decision Insight has projected will be in these new boundaries. And I'm sorry, I take that back. What I just said about the 4th and 5th grade are the existing numbers here. This column is a projection of your K5 students that would be residing in the new boundary. So the 520 are the total number of K5 students projected for BUB. Because the rest of these numbers are all a projection. So your K1 students projected. So these are your incoming kindergartners for next year and your incoming kindergartners for the following year. This is a projection for BUB. This is a projection for Castro. This is your projection of K-1 students, next year's kindergartners, and the kindergarten year after for Huff. This is Landell's, Montaloma, Slater, Thorkoff, and then your district-wide total projection for kindergarten and first grade students that you don't have in your system yet. And again, these numbers do not include your SD students. They do not include your out-of-district students.
These are if we don't move the boundary.
We
Go
got a
ahead,
question,
Ellen.
hold on.
Do these include the choice programs?
They do. The question was, does these include choice programs? These are geographic projections. So these students would be the number of students that reside within that particular area. And then if we were to go back to the earlier presentation, Tony created a formula that based off historical trends that would say how many kids typically leave Bub to attend the choice schools.
Right.
So Bub and Huff tend to have a high return rate. Landos, Theracol, Castro, and Montaloma have a lower, meaning that more kids are moving out. With the case of Castro, it's a little bit different because most of them are still on the exact same campus. They just happen to go to Mistral.
Yeah, so the troublesome number, and this is why I'd like to have those choice program numbers in here, is you look at 2019 Slater and then we're at 588.
Right, so Slater's projected enrollment for this area is 465. We can get you the projected numbers, and at some point maybe I'll ask Tony, and I can pull it. It's in the previous presentation.
And do we have some ideas in the works for how we would put those kids in classrooms for a school that's built for 450?
So the school is built for 450. You have to remember that that is under the state's guideline of 25 students per classroom. In grades 4 and 5, the enrollment actually is a lot higher. And so we have more kids that can squeeze in because our kids don't come in packets of 20, in this case now 24. The second thing is that each school has 2 flex rooms. And what happens with those flex rooms is also subject to change. But we are, Slater or the school in North Westman will open up at capacity when it has a 5th grade. And we knew this when we set the boundary. Any other questions?
Well, I have a comment. I think planning should start sooner rather than later for if this school is going to be at capacity for 5th grade. What are our plans for putting those kids in classrooms? So, yeah.
Repeat your question, sorry.
So it's not really a question, it's a comment that we should have a plan for, or we should start thinking right now for if Slater is going to be at capacity at 5th grade, what are we going to do with those kids? So we're going to comfortably put them in the 2 flex rooms. What are we going to do? We're going to put another portable on the campus. What ideas are being considered?
Well, part of that will be determined by what the board decides in terms of who stays where. And then the second thing is that because you're looking at enrollment in pockets of 25, so every classroom is being able to take 25. Once we know what the final number is, we'll be able to accurately predict what our options are. But right now, this is all assumptions. So we know how many kids reside within that particular area. We know how many kids that are in K through 3. that would be in that area. We have an idea of how many kids would be in 4th grade. But until they enroll, right, just because you select to come here, some people hold a space and then they decide to come. So until that they actually show up on day one, it doesn't get us closer. So we're still sort of a little ways out. And then from there, staff will look at what our options are, including the use of an additional portable. There is extra space on Slater that we've designed in to add portables. It will essentially, if I had a picture of this, remember that's the school in North Westman is actually like a C, so that you can see the field at the same time. We would eventually do something like what we do at Therakoff, which is you'll start coming down that C and that field, that area would get cut off, or we would use a similar design because Slater or North Westman is very similar to Stevenson. We use another design where we would put a row of buildings parallel to one of the outside buildings so that it sort of blocks. And that was one of the earlier things we talked about. But we would have to go back and do some site work to adjust. The easiest thing to do is to drop portables or modulars off in the corner closest to where there's a little track or something that's behind there. That's the easiest option. But depending on what enrollment does, you'll go there. The second option would be to carve up the Landals, Therakoff, and North Westman boundary to readjust it so that they all can fit. Because the other complicating factor is that you also have East Westman that is coming online, which is right next door to it. And then the final nuclear option would be to evict our tenants and to reopen Slater as a possibility. And then there actually is one more option that we've toyed with behind the scenes, which is to create grade level schools in the North Bay area, which means that we would have to look at transportation costs, but essentially you would utilize North Westman, Therakoff, and Montaloma, and you would do grade levels at each particular site. And if you need to, because of the growth that's going to be coming also from North Bayshore, you would then turn Crittenden into a 7-8 school, and you would rerun the numbers there. So each school would have 1 or 2 grade levels, and the kids would move across a band. Those are all options that we've explored, but again, it's a plan based off of one set of scenarios. In case that goes bad, this is the second set of plans. In case that goes bad, it's a third set of plans. You just keep going. We'll have a better idea once we get closer to its official opening. Because you have to remember by January of this time, we will actually have accurate numbers of enrollment, so we can get pretty close to understanding what North Westman's true population is going to be.
Is there more to the presentation, Dr. Rudolph, or is it time for clarifying questions and then for members of the public?
Tony, do you have more? The first computer died, so I have to log on. So you got to give me control of this computer. Sorry. But do you have more to present, Tony?
No, this was the last spreadsheet.
Okay.
We finished all of the data that you wanted to see.
Okay. So if you can give me access to the computer.
Okay.
I'll use my computer and jump on. Thank you. Go ahead with clarifying questions while I do this.
So clarifying questions, trustees, before we open it up to members of the public? Members of the public wishing to speak on this topic, now's your chance. And I have a card from Lindsay Phillips. And were there any other cards, Kathy? No? Okay. So Ms. Phillips? Can I, before you speak, can I ask for a show of hands about how many people wanted to speak on this topic this evening? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's at 9:18.
Tony, you got control again. You're good.
So you each will have 2 minutes.
Sorry, I'll get out your way.
Oh yeah.
Hi, so my name is Lindsay
Pull it
Phillips.
down a little bit more for the folks at home. Thanks.
Okay, great. And I was here a few weeks ago asking you to urge the EPTF to give grandfathering more serious consideration. Tonight I'm back to ask, now that it's your job, to ask you to take a more detailed look at the data and to prioritize the stability of kids' education above convenience. I suspect you might be tired of hearing from those of us who are impacted, but I'm doing what any parent and educator would do, which is advocating for minimal disruption for my kids and also all kids' education. As my neighbors and I have voiced our concerns about transitioning to new schools, the response has been roughly changing boundaries means someone's got to absorb the pain of it and looks like it's going to be your kids. This is a hard message, and I think that you could make the transition less painful and a better experience for everybody. According to the data we just saw, a complete reset with no grandfathering, no transfers will require that at least 637 students will be forcibly relocated in the fall of 2019. That is about, once you add in next year's kinder class, that's probably more like 800. That is about 1 out of every 3 kids at neighborhood schools who will make a transition. Even if you pull out the Slater population, we're still talking about 1 in 4 kids remaining at neighborhood schools who would be forced to transfer. This is a giant shift, and you should consider it with gravity. And as you think about this, I'd ask you to get clear data on 3 points. 1, what would it look like to grandfather at each grade level individually? We've seen data for the 5th grade, for the 2nd through 4th grade, but what about breaking each of those grade levels out individually so that you can see what you're really working with? 2nd, how would an immediate change actually affect each campus? It looks to me like a complete reset would result in about 40% of the student body being new at Castro, Landals, and Thurikoff in the fall of 2014. Adding the kinders, that's about half of the kids that are new. Is that a good idea? And how are schools going to adapt?
Thank
I
you,
know
Ms.
somebody's
Phillips.
going to be unhappy at some point, but I think we can do better than a quick reset. Thanks.
Thank you. And I just want to say because 2 minutes isn't a long time, if you have more that you wanted to let us know, please email us. We read our email. Okay, the next card I have here is for Jason Taylor, and maybe the rest of you can line up. Jason Taylor, Caleb Gross, Gina Chen, and Matt Grunwald. So
Thank you very much. My name is Jason Taylor. I live in Shoreline West, and I have a 4th grader and a 1st grader at Bub. Thank you very much for taking this on, and this is obviously very challenging. I'm impressed with all the different numbers that we're seeing, but one thing I would like you to consider as you continue to look at the data is, yes, these are the kids that might be moving, but all of these individual kids have friends that are also impacted by their friends moving. I don't believe these numbers actually reflect how this impacts individual students, their families, these schools, and these communities. So I would just like you to consider that these numbers actually don't represent the impact to these children, our communities, and our schools. Thank you.
thank you. Caleb, is it Gross? Sorry, don't mean to butcher your name.
Hi, my name is Caleb Gross, and I just have a quick point because, like Jason, I'm really impressed with the way the district does business, tries to look at data to make really solid planning decisions. The capital improvement was at like $250 million in capital improvement projects. I mean, it's impressive. I want us to do the same with grandfathering because, like Jason said, the biggest cost in this is being put on those kids. And this is something that has been studied. People have studied the impact, even controlling for other factors associated, divorce, moving. Forced school moves, on the whole, predict lower performance, lower class participation, and I want us to take that into account. Kids are resilient is not data. It's a cliche. And I think we're better than making decisions with that as a piece of the logic in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Gina Chen? Can we adjust the microphone because it looks a little tall?
Is that what you're trying to say?
I just want to make sure that folks at home can hear you.
I even wore the heels today. All right. My name's Gina, and as you know, I've been actively engaged in these discussions, and this is what I've heard. So kids are resilient. People have shared how they made it through when they had to move schools. Well, I also had to move schools, and even though I made it through, I'm alive, I'm here today, I took a hit, right? So my confidence was shaken. My new school counselor assumed I had to be placed into an ESL class because I wasn't speaking enough. My mom had to tell the counselor that I started school as a kindergartner in the U.S. and spoke English just fine. As a matter of fact, I spoke English at home to my parents' chagrin. So, you know what? I even spoke better English than my parents. So, you know, there is a hit that's taken, right? So let's not undervalue that. Two, I've also heard that everyone wants to have a community for the children attending schools. The question is, what's defined as a community? So people are interpreting community to be based by location. Community is bigger than boundaries. For certain areas, their current school is the only neighborhood community they had ever known. Lastly, I also heard that portables are costly. Well, I'd also say that ensuring a smooth transition could be very costly as well. The community is expecting that if grandfathering does not happen, there will be resources put in place to have a successful transition. Those resources could be just as costly as keeping a portable in place for just a few years. Think about it. Do a cost comparison, portables versus extra teacher hours, hiring extra teacher aides, counselors, and so forth. That is a cost too. Lastly, let me end by saying, I do not envy your position. You have a very difficult challenge ahead of you. I would like to offer my help. We would like to offer our help, our time, to help the board think through the issues, review the data, help you build graphical, analytical narratives using smart business tools like Tableau, and come up with creative, intelligent options that can lead to a viable grandfathering solution. Let us know how we can help. We have smart data, analytical people that can build really comprehensive studies for you guys, and we want to do it for free. We're here.
Thank you. Matt Grunwald.
Hello. Thank you. Lindsay stole my thunder, actually, so we should have coordinated. I don't want to advocate a particular policy. I just have seen the data, and while it's helpful to some extent for Tony to go through, pages of data, you're executives for this organization, so you should be able to ask the questions that you want to get real world answers to, right? Like, how many butts in seats are there going to be at Slater? And I think the numbers that are being shown to you, here they include Nestrel and Stevenson, so you could take those out. I think, there's also some projections that are maybe higher or lower than they could be. And, you should ask Tony to call those out. If you have a question about portables, if you're worried about the cost of portables that we'll have to keep due to grandfathering, we should ask what the effects will be on a specific site campus. How many portables will there be, right? And I think that should come through a visualization. So you should ask for these numbers to be put in a consumable format where you can easily see how many kids are going to be at each school and what can happen with grandfathering and each option kind of parsed out. If you did, you'd see that, Mauna Loma, we talk about Slater and Huff overcrowding, but like Mauna Loma is going to need kids. It's going to be well below, I think below 400. Actually, the entire district on an average, if you take all the schools that we have, I think with the projections, we're at like 401 students per school, so there's some balancing that could happen. There's some rules that, with intra-district transfers that you could but I just ask you to ask those real world questions. this is really confusing, I think, for anyone to, what are the key takeaways, to get those key takeaways? And I would encourage you to ask for that executive summary. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, trustees. Thoughts, questions, comments?
Dr. Rudolph, did you hear the last public commenter's advice that we should ask for an executive summary of this data? What's your summary of what all this means to us and how we should use it in making a decision?
So I think the first one that I would say is that what our next course of actions are is really determined on how many kids you allow to stay at their current school. Obviously, there are, and we've looked at some of these. So hold on for a second. So for instance, if you look at the total number of kids that are in transition zones, there are about 205. Once you take out the students that would go to Slater, there are about 205 students that actually would be moved around. And so the first thing I would say is that there's a big consideration about, are you moving all kids versus are you moving kids that are in transition zones? And there's some nuance there that I would add, right? Because some people will argue that moving one group of individuals versus moving another group is going to be a little bit unfair. And let's talk about that other group. So for years, our district has practiced transferring because there was not enough space at a particular school. Over the last 2 years, or this year and next year, we have eliminated that practice. Our goal is that if you attend a school within a particular attendance area, that you will attend that school, right? And so the famous story that I have is a parent from Huff actually came to me and said, I live literally in view of Huff, but I am not on that list. I cannot attend, my kid cannot walk to their school. So of course, I called him on his bluff and said, show me your house so that I can see it. This is my first month there. He picked me up at the district office, drove me over to his house, and showed me from his backyard, Huff, and said, my neighbor is going to allow my kids to walk directly through, right? So we have two different issues here in terms of how we approach kids. We have kids, which would fall under the complete reset, that we have moved as an approach to balance classes and to balance schools and to deal with things like the Romero Act and to provide choice to our students. And our district has done that for quite some time. Then we have kids who are in the transition zones. These are kids that are impacted because we have changed boundaries over the last couple of years, or we have work to do it. And then the last thing I would say as an executive summary, that your decision predicates how much money we're going to spend to keep kids at their schools, but it also has to be weighed with how much space exists at a particular site. So for instance, if you to look at Bub currently with its portables on it, and I know that the other piece of this is that you have parents at Bub who are complaining that it's an impacted playground, that their kids have to deal with construction. Castro and Mistral would probably say, you guys have it good because you actually have a playground. But it is possible to hold 725 students at that site. It is. The total cost for portables is $225,000 per year. We have to take that into account. Without the portables, Bub can only hold 500 students. Right now, again, I would say that is based off of what the state says, the state requirement for the number of students that are supposed to be in a classroom in an elementary school, which is 25-1. So it is possible that you can house more kids at Bub, but it is important to understand that the state's guideline says we only have 500 classrooms. We can add more, but it means that we will sacrifice particular programs like the YMCA and any other type of Beyond the Bell, any program that has an additional modular unit. So we're at sort of a point. We have 3 schools that are currently reaching capacity: Huff, Bub, and Landals. We can no longer afford to keep putting kids into the schools without adjusting something. Landals is now officially at capacity, and we cannot add another class even if we wanted to. We had to move our transitional kindergarten class out of Landals in order to accommodate the number of kids that are currently in the boundary. So we are at a breaking point at 3 of our sites, and we have some space for growth at the other sites.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to keep it without diving back into the numbers. Is that?
Who else has comments they'd like to share or questions they'd like to ask?
Yeah. So when you say transition zones, what do you mean?
So,
1 through 8.
hey, Tony, can you pull up the slide that has the transition zones? Thanks. Okay, so there are 8 areas that were that contain kids that have been moved or that will be moved. So you have Castro City, Shoreline West, you have Willowgate, you have North Westman, you have the Wagon Wheel. I do not know what number 4 is called. I apologize. Nor do I know what number 2 is called, or 7.
I think 2 is the above triangle.
Right.
So,
So
yeah, go ahead.
So these areas are what we would consider a transition zone, which are the neighborhoods that, as a result of us adjusting our boundaries, we have a group of kids who are now out of their school boundaries and are supposed to attend. If no kids were there, right? If all those dots disappeared, and we started school like fresh, right? And then we put the kids back in. All of those kids in 1, which is Shoreline West, would attend Landals and be in that particular zone. So these are transition zones where at some point that community will attend their appropriate school. And when they attend is determined by how long grandfathering exists.
Yeah, so taking this logically, in order to populate Slater, we need to populate it with students from the transition zone.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct. You need to populate it from 4, 8, and 3.
Right. And shift some others around in order to make all those work. So I think the question you're asking us is, when do we want those transition zone kids to move into their new schools, including populating Slater?
It is how fast you want Slater
Right.
to,
Right.
yes, correct.
So talking about right away, are we going to grandfather 5th graders? Are we going to grandfather 4th graders? Are we going to grandfather 5th graders and siblings, 4th and 5th graders with siblings? Those are the kinds of questions that you want us to discuss and come to some resolution about?
Not today. Today is if you have additional data questions or things that you feel like you need to know that can help inform your discussion. But if you already have an idea, that's perfectly fine. We'll be jotting down what you say and using that to formulate a recommendation within not the 17th, but the meeting after that.
Okay,
And
thank you.
and to give you an idea, so I already ran some numbers just to play around. So if you were to take Bub, there are 405 students within that particular area. If you were to take out Shoreline West, which is 94 students, you're now at 311. If you were then to turn back around and say that you were going to grandfather the fifth graders, you're back up to 318. If we take the number of kids, and that number actually would have to go up to 325. If you take the number of kids who are currently enrolled or who are stating that they are going to attend BUB next year, that gives you 103 students. So then you take off 20 who attend the choice schools. So next year, K through 4, BUB would be 401 students. So it's almost, for a school, if you take away all its portables, has a capacity for 500 at the 25-to-1 ratio.
So I'd like to say one more thing, President Blakely and Dr. Rudolph. Listening to parents and, being around this for a long time, I think the sooner we can get finality to this decision about where kids are going to be assigned to go to school, the better for these kids and their families, because there's a lot of angst that we get in emails and we hear up here. So if people could know by the end of this year, which sounds like it's your plan,
That's our goal.
that they would have a year to, to start getting used to it. Parents can talk to their children. Children can, talk with each other, where are you going to go to school? I think that level of pre-knowledge would help a lot of people.
It would, and that's the reason why we want to resolve this by June 14th, so that we can start working on our plans. The first one is we want to communicate to rising kids who are coming in. The second one is that we know who these kids are, right? We can reach out to them. The information actually exists within a database. We even know the number of kids, even though they haven't officially, they've enrolled, but they haven't officially attended our school. We know that there are 20 kindergartners who are going to attend BUB, who, and I'm picking on BUB right now, who actually would attend Landals, but because Landals was full, we couldn't offer them entry into Landals early. And so there's a couple things that we've heard from not only principals, but that we've talked about internally. First one is that we want to do a lot of outreach over the next 6 months after the decision is made, so that people understand what's going to impact them. I know that we've seen a couple emails about informing people a little bit earlier. The reason why we want to wait until the decision is made is because we want to make sure that we're reaching out to the right people. The second one is that we want to use our school community engagement facilitators to make sure that they're a part of the transition and helping. We also have heard from a couple principals who have suggested that they would like to place all of the kids that are in a transition zone into one particular classroom so that they build friendships together, so that when they move from one school to the next, they have a group of friends that are already there. The other piece is that if there are other supports that we need, whether it's mental health or counselors or anything else, that we'll be able to provide support at those particular sites. And then, of course, it is the usual going out to various communities and talking about the impact that it's going to have on your particular zone. Some of the emails that I've seen that have came to me personally are people who say, I purchased a house in this particular area, and so I'm a little upset that I may be moving schools. I completely understand that. And so we want to reach out to neighborhood associations and talk with them too. So, but we can't do that until we have an accurate idea of what the actual challenge is. And I know a lot of ideas have been floated out there, but that's what we're waiting on.
Trustee Gutierrez.
Dr. Rudolph. So, if we have questions and as we think more about the subject matter, we always have the freedom to be able to send you email and ask what those questions are.
Correct.
And then you'll provide us the response.
Correct.
Okay. And when we do that, that too will be also placed on the website so people can review them as we
Correct.
move along in this process.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. How, not by whom, but how was a full reset proposed? That was new in my estimation, which is something that we've, at least collectively and in public, not really.
So I do not want to guess on how a particular group got there. But what I would say is that I have twins, and oftentimes with twins, you believe in fairness. And so you buy kids the same toys, or you discipline them the same way. You do not treat them differently because that is the way of the world.
Okay.
Sometimes that works. I mean, it works when you're buying Barbie dolls, right? It does not work in other cases.
Right.
So I believe that the complete reset was a response that, because the Enrollment Priorities Task Force has a representative from every single community or every single attendance zone. So I think it was a response to that certain community areas, and I'm not arguing this is right or wrong in any which way, felt that it would be cleaner to do a complete reset and to transition everyone back to their home school, because that would be the fairest thing to do. That's how I believe the conversation of a complete reset came. Okay. At the same time, because we do this all the time in cabinet, we play what's called the 11th man. And so with the 11th man, I would say there are kids that we moved. Sorry, the 11th man is when everybody agrees on a particular decision. It is incumbent upon one of us to become the 11th. There are actually 10 of us in the room. So someone has to become the 11th man. The 11th man or woman has to present the alternative argument.
The devil's advocate.
Right, correct, the devil's advocate. So playing the 11th man, it is that we've moved these kids. We moved them when I first got here. We would move a kid from school A to school B. And that's actually how we came to the decision to make sure that every kid was at their neighborhood school. It was because last year we proposed moving kids from their neighborhood school to Montaloma, to Theracov, to Castro. And it was clear that the board said kids should attend their neighborhood schools. And that's how we got there. So
okay.
The 11th man would say that while yes, it is fair to reset everyone, at the same time, some of those kids were moved not because of a boundary change, but because of a previous practice that the district had. So that's how, now, I'm not trying to argue one way is better than another. There are pluses and minuses to each one, but I believe that is how the complete reset went.
Okay.
And I have heard even more extreme versions of that, which would include a complete reset of the choice schools. And so, again, it is not I'm not providing any commentary about what I believe. I'm simply saying how I believe that decision came.
Okay. I just was curious. It was quite a remarkable proposal. I'm sure there are better words for it, but I was surprised.
And I just want to point out that there also have been conversations that the communities that are getting the new school should be treated differently than the communities that are being forced to move. That North Wistman is getting a new school, and that's why we're going through this. And so, one of the proposals was, or one of the suggestions was that North Wistman, that whole area, the school on North Wistman, that area takes the brunt of the moves, and that other kids are allowed to remain at their home schools, and then they transition out. Again, playing devil's advocate or 11th man, I think that there are parents who reside within that transition area who are currently attending Huff or Bub who would argue that they would like to stay at their home school too.
Orlando.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'd like to see the data for second graders as well broken out. I mean, we've seen third graders who would be fifth graders. I'd like to just see what that looks like. I don't know whether it will fit, but I'd like to have that information available. And with, you know, without siblings and with siblings.
Okay.
And you talked about forced move kids where the district insisted that they move.
Mhm.
I'd be interested in that data. Because if those kids wanted to stay to their, you know, to their non-neighborhood school because we made them move, it strikes me as a bit harsh. I realize that there's some equity in treating everybody exactly the same, but I think the situations are different. And probably not all kids would want to stay there, or not all families, but I'd like to see what those numbers are. Romero Act also, how does that work? We don't we have to let the Romero Act kids stay where they are?
So we are currently not subjected to the Romero Act.
Okay, so everybody who started out there is graduated out.
No, we still have some kids that actually were allowed to transfer because of the Romero Act. So for the public's understanding, the Romero Act allows students at low performing schools throughout the state determines what a Romero Act school is, are allowed to transfer out. Our one Romero Act school actually is Theracroft. And you're allowed to transfer out to another school, provided that that school has space. And so those students, we do still have students in elementary schools who were allowed to use the Romero Act to leave Theracroft to go to another school. They are most likely at Landos, Montaloma, Castro. Huff and Bub. There may be one or two at Huff and Bub, but those would have been the days when there was still space.
But don't we have to let them stay at those schools, or what's the impact on? I mean, what are our legal obligations with respect to those specific kids?
So technically, throughout this, you're supposed to provide open enrollment if there is particular space at a school. You cannot, the reason why some schools do, students were not allowed to move to certain schools due to the Romero Act is because you can't move a kid who is zoned for that school out of their particular school. So it has to be about space. Because we're not subject to the Romero Act, you can technically move them back. Whether you choose to exercise that right is something else. And then we would also need to find out which grade level they are in. We would know because of the last 2 years, we haven't had, Theracroft hasn't been subject to the Romero Act. So you would probably be looking somewhere in the neighborhood of second grade on up. And so we would have to go back and look at that. By the time this occurs, the chances are that you'll have a fourth grader who would have been allowed to transition from Theracroft to another school due to the Romero Act. And so they would only be at that school for 2 years.
Okay, well, I guess I'd like to see the data on those kids as well. And then I'd also like to see, it doesn't strike me as right if there are kids, for example, that would live in the new Bub zone who are currently attending, let's just say Castro, who want to stay at Castro. So I'd like to see so I'm really probably talking about Castro, Montaloma, and Theracroft, that are the schools that have less enrollment and therefore more room. And especially if there's kids that don't live in those neighborhood, in the neighborhood zoned for those schools, but that are going there and want to stay there. I'd like to see what that looks like, because it seems to me appropriate to offer that to them.
You're talking about the number of kids who are currently out of their boundaries, or what is?
Well, I guess, yeah. I'm interested in knowing what the numbers would be if we offered the grandfathering opportunity to kids who are not at their home schools, when their home schools are the schools that have a lower enrollment right now, and are projected to have a lower enrollment after 2019.
So we have that data currently. These are the number of students who are out of their zone, and you could look at. So let's take Bub. So there are 13 kids who are sorry, okay. There are 8 kids who are in the BUB zone who attend Castro.
Right. Okay, so we do have that data.
We do have that. Right. And so if you're looking at the number of kids who are at our lower enrolled schools, just going across with BUB, there are 8 at Castro. There are 3 at Montaloma, and then there are 7 at Theracov for a total of 18 kids.
Okay.
So you could look at that and say for schools that are underprescribed, would you allow them? The challenge that you run into, though, is I want to draw you to Montaloma. So Montaloma is underprescribed and Theracov is underprescribed. There are 25 kids who are in the attendance area for Montaloma, who are currently at Theracov. So you just have to weigh that in. And if you're fine with, because both of them are underprescribed and they both have the ability to have the space, then I think you just let that one slide. I'm sure Mrs. Higgins, who was in here at one point, would be glad to keep the 25 kids at her school. And that could be also because the transition, we carved off top of the top of Theracov, right. And that's why they're currently out of bounds.
Okay.
Can I say, I'm staring at the clock here. I'd like to move to extend, and I'm always liberal on this, move to extend the end time of this meeting till 10:30.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
No.
Okay, on a motion by trustee Wheeler, seconded by trustee Coladonato, the motion passes on a vote of 4 to 1. So in the 4 were trustee Wheeler, trustee Wilson, trustee Coladonato, and trustee Blakely, and trustee Gutierrez voted against the motion. I would hope that we can go less than that time-wise, but thank you.
But you still had more questions.
Yeah, I do. I do. Well, just really probably a little bit more of a comment. I just wanted to say that I like the fact that you've already done some work on these sort of soft launch ideas, like the outreach, the SCEFs, what I was calling friendship circles, but like maybe clustering kids that are in schools where they're living in a transition zone and like therefore likely to move to the next, move together so that it foster those friendships. If there are other things that we could do, exploring what other districts have done to ease the transition for families that are moving, I'd like to do all those kinds of things that we can. And it sounds like you've made more progress in that area than I was aware of, so I'm glad to hear that. And just one more, maybe this is a question. We talked about portables and the cost of the portables and the places where there's room for portables or not. You mentioned that BUB could actually hold 500 students. I know the different schools have different sizes, and in a board before I joined, it was decided it's going to be $450 per school, but the realities with the growing population in Mountain View and stuff, I think we're going to likely in the future have to take advantage of the schools where there is a little bit more infrastructure to hold more students. And I guess I'd like to see those numbers about what, after all the construction and improvements are done, what is realistic at each of the elementary campuses in terms of students.
Is this minus portables?
I guess I'd like to see it minus portables and, how many portables you could comfortably put, like could the school comfortably hold an extra portable or 2?
Okay.
Yeah.
And what the cost of those portables are. It's $225, but I don't know, divided by how many?
It's $9,000.
$9,000 per year.
That's if you're renting them.
Right, okay.
If you're purchasing them.
I'll remind you, our original conversations were 450 to 600. And I think the 600 was taking into account that some of these schools could accommodate some portables. So that's what it sounds like we're already hearing tonight, that, some of these schools just won't be 450. So, and I've always been fine with that.
That's correct, but right now, so I'll just use Bub because we demolished a series of portables to build an MER. You would, and they're going to gain 2 more classrooms, which are for SDC because the decision was to place SDC classes over there. We would have to add portables back into the scope of work to extend its capability. And the reason why I say that is because the Brown portables that exist on most of these campuses are rental. After, and Dr. Clark and I talked about this, after next year, which is a real interesting interpretation of how we use Measure G funds. I just need to put that one out there. But technically, at the end of this year, we are supposed to start paying for those portables out of our general budget. We could argue that because we have one more school that we're building, that we can pay for it for 1 additional year. After that, Measure G funds, because once you issue the bond, you have 3 years to spend it. That money will, if we don't spend it, goes back to taxpayers. And so any rentals will come off of our general budget. And at some point, you'll have to run the numbers to say, is it feasible to keep renting, or is it better to just purchase a unit and to place it there? Which means that we would need to go back out, grade, do some construction and other stuff. Now, we could use developer fees to pay for it, but I want to remind everyone that our developer fees are already committed to pay off a $2.6 million certificate of participation. Now, while we did just increase our developer fees, that will take in effect in 60 days. It is hard to predict whether or not the developer fees will always be able to cover the certificate of participation. Because this year, currently, last year we brought in about $2.46 million, and we currently are only at $1.5 million. And we have 2 more months to collect developer fees. So the hit to the general budget, which will come out of lease revenue, is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1 million. That is money that would be used for other operations. So I'm not arguing that it's not a sound strategy. I'm simply saying that it's going to cost us. And we would need to run the numbers to see which one is a better strategy, purchasing them ourselves and putting them to grade and finding slots for them, or renting them out for X amount of years. So.
Is it a huge project to run some rough numbers on that so we would have it in the back of our minds?
No, we can ask Grace on the beauty of doing construction across your whole district is that you have a construction management team that can do it. What we could possibly do, Dr. Clark, is maybe look at a scenario, pick a school, and sort of show a graphic of it and talk about what it would look like, how it looks, and then what the cost is, so you at least can see the visual. Maybe we'll take Landos because that is the largest site with 10 portable units on it. And it gives you a sort of an idea of how much is impacted. And maybe we even, I don't know if DTA or HYA could possibly say, here's some spots that we could place one. But we could do that.
That would be helpful. I mean, I was just at Landos the other evening with Dr. Clark in the Bond Oversight Committee, and there were more portables on that playground than there were the last time there was some work done. And, I don't know where you'd fit another one. I mean, the kids have to have somewhere to play. So I'd be curious to see that. So thank you.
Okay.
I feel like I've taken too much time this evening. Is there anybody else who's got questions or comments for Dr. Rudolph?
I guess, sorry, Greg.
No, you start.
You keep commenting about the 25 student per classroom
It's actually
quota.
24.
It's 24, isn't it?
So
The only reason I asked is because you said that Bub had approximately, for current estimates, 105 incoming kindergartners
correct.
if they all show up. So that's 5 kindergarten classes, similar to what Huff has now. And Huff also has an additional 5 incoming kinders. So that makes 5 strands per grade at Huff. And now it seems like the same trend is persisting through Bub. Is that an accurate assumption?
So the state assumes that you can put 25 kids in a particular classroom
Okay.
at our current square feet of, I think, 925. However, that's the Department of, what is the S? DSA.
Department of State Architect?
State Architect. That's OPSC. There we go. So that's one office. But the legislator has said that you need to have class size at 24:1. And that's
Funding.
where they provide funding. So technically, even though you can put 25 kids in, if we did put 25 kids in, we would lose funding. So you have to make progress towards it, but we've made so much progress towards it that I think it may be either this year or next year that it officially goes in. So
Okay.
you could technically add one additional kid in there, but 24:1 is how we place our kids in grades K through 3, even though you could technically put 25 kids in there. Our collective bargaining agreement allows for a couple more, but the $1 million that we get for state funding supersedes our need to add additional kids. And so we're fine with that.
Okay.
But in grades 4 and 5, our collective bargaining agreement allows us to put 30 kids in a classroom. And so that's why we put 30. That's why you have this very small class size in K through 3. And then in 4th grade, it sort of balloons a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Greg?
No problem. I think it'd be preferable to have fewer than the maximum allowable number of students per classroom, 23, 22, 21, something like that.
It would, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Sean's over there smiling. He would agree with me. And I would agree too.
Yeah.
I think under 20, it becomes a little different.
But my youngest had 28 kids in their kindergarten class, and that's a lot of kids. And I think that something in the lower 20s would be preferable. So to the extent that 400 students at a school means 18 classes full of like 23 kids or something, those aren't maxed out classrooms, but that's a good thing in my opinion.
Right.
I want to echo President Blakely's comment about.
Hold on, I don't think we need Tony, so I'm gonna let him go.
Okay.
Let him go.
Yeah. We're paying him by the hour, I assume. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Hey, Tony, we're gonna let you go.
Okay, so I'll shut the screen down too.
Okay, I'll send you everything we need.
Thank
All right.
you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, ma'am. All right, sorry.
No problem. I want to echo what President Blakely said. To the extent that there are students living outside, students attending schools outside their 2019 boundaries, but they're going to a school that's not impacted, I don't see why they have to be moved.
Okay.
The point is to overcrowded schools. And so we can have a list of which ones are overcrowded and which ones have have tons of portables laying around so that we could adapt to this temporary situation where the boundaries are wrong. But after that, I don't see any reason to move a student who, say, lives in North Wisman and is attending Therkoff and wants to stay there. I don't see any reason to force them to go to Slater.
Okay. Okay.
Because there's plenty of space at the school they attend.
Okay.
I thought you were going to say this, so now I will say the other thing I agree with Board President Blakely about is this idea that you said the principals have been talking about of putting kids that are going to be moved the following year into the same classroom so that they make friends with a group of kids who will be moving with them. I think that's a real humane proposal, and I would support that.
I agree with what you just said and what Trustee Wheeler just said. I would also be on board with those two proposals.
Okay.
I just like the fact that we're bringing up the ideas and that we have more time to discuss it at this level, so that once you understand what questions we have, because it's a give and take situation, it's transparent to the people that are here and also that are viewing or that will read about this, that the board is actually trying to do what they can to make this work for everyone. We don't take this lightly. We never have. You know, we all read our emails. I know that, but the issue here is that there's a misperception of what's the ultimate intent, and in bringing this now to us for discussion, we can figure this out at a different level as equals. And with you helping us with the information, in the end, we'll make the best decision, like we always have, in the best interest of the students. I'm confident of that. So I appreciate your time in bringing this issue to us for feedback.
One of the questions I had in the presentation is about the complete reset. So I asked your thoughts on that. And the reason why I asked that is because it does, as we start diving into this, it does drive how we look at information. So, you know, to one of the public's comments, it is 637 students out of, I think the number was 2,600. So it's a sizable number of students who are in K through 3, and it will increase. At some point, it will be close to 800, give or take, depending on what enrollment trends look like. And so is the board interested in exploring that further? Or do you want this, do you want us to focus our attention on transition zones only? Or do you want us to continue looking at both so that you sort of have an open field? And the only reason why I ask that is because it does determine, so you saw what Tony had to do to figure out the number of siblings. So he didn't do that for the complete reset because it's a lot high. It takes a little bit more time to create a spreadsheet and then to go through those particular items. So is that something that you would like us to continue to look into? It's just a matter of how we want to direct our time is really what I'm asking.
I'll start. I personally don't think this is something, that's not the intent of why we started down this road in the first place. I think, as it's already been mentioned, we have schools that are becoming grossly overcrowded. We are opening a new school we need to fill, and to impact as few of people as possible in these already specified transition zones, I think is the most thoughtful approach that we can do given our facilities constraints, our financial constraints, and the true goal of why we've undertaken this entire exercise. I think a hard reset seems extreme, and I'm not interested.
I agree with Trustee Wilson.
As do I.
I agree with Trustee Gutierrez and Trustee Wheeler and Trustee Wilson.
And playing devil's advocate, I'm not sure what I think yet, but we were trying to build neighborhood schools. And so I don't want to traumatize kids and make them move unnecessarily, but if the neighborhood school piece of it is a value, we would reset more kids. I don't want to reset Stevenson or Mistral. I mean, Mistral, you just couldn't reset, and I think those were choice programs. So I think the approach of it, the slides tonight didn't quite get us all the way there, but I think those should stay where they are.
I would like to say, you know, in response to what you just said, you know, one idea that's always out there is, do we give preferential treatment to the choice programs? So if you say we're not going to reset Stevenson and Mistral, and I believe we should not, if we're not going to reset Stevenson and Mistral, why should we reset the other schools?
I guess I have a clarifying question. They will all be reset once our current kids are, you know, the boundaries are in place, and in 2019, that current incoming kindergarten class, that is a reset. It begins then.
Yeah.
Correct.
So we're talking about the current,
transition.
yeah.
It
Well,
is.
I
and that
just wanted to
assumes the enrollment
clarify.
priorities don't like allow them to tag along forever with siblings.
So
So that's
Well,
where
but
we go back in
won't-
enrollment
what
priorities.
you're going to determine that. They will determine how things. So what I would say is just, it's really about what is we're talking about maximum numbers here. If the goal is to move as little kids as possible or to minimize the impact as much as possible, right? So let's just argue for a second, because I know I've heard this, that you grandfather everyone from K through 6 in 2020, right? But if you could do that, if there was enough space to do that, and then every student, every K after that was to move, would you be comfortable with that, right? And not because of that, but because it is the way to be the least disruptive to the school district, versus a complete reset is the most destructive approach that you could have. It is sort of the nuclear option in terms of resetting boundaries. And so maybe I used the wrong example in the beginning, but it's really about how many kids do you want to move? Right now, you're talking about 484 versus 683, not including fifth graders. Or 637, sorry. So do you want to spare 150 kids from having to move because of the district's past approach to moving kids? Is that a better way of phrasing it?
Yes, and I think I'm in favor then, because that goes to some of it's not all of the questions I asked, the information I asked, like the Romero Act kids and the forced move kids, but it would also then theoretically include families that transferred for other reasons. Maybe they used to live there and they moved or something.
Okay.
But yeah.
So then what we would focus our attention on is looking at what are the maximum numbers that we could accommodate at a particular school. We'll get you the other data points that you've asked for, so then you can have a more informed decision to say, oh, wait a minute, there are, X amount of kids, and you can keep climbing down the list to see how big you can make a school and what the cost of it is. And then we would tell you what it looks like to wean that off.
So I have a question or a comment, and this is for people in the audience and people who've written letters to us. And it's a logic question for me, which is, some of us are exploring the idea of allowing some kind of sibling allowance. So let's imagine, for example, fifth graders and their siblings while that fifth grader is in fifth grade. So that's a point of discussion that we're going to have. And then some people have written to us and said that, well, if you allow that, then what about their younger siblings? And then it would be disruptive to them. So my question to people who write in that question is, doesn't that mean then we shouldn't allow any siblings? Because it would be disruptive to, anyone who is transferring. So, I'd ask you to think about what you're asking for.
No.
By email or at the next
by
meeting?
email. By email, I'd welcome your input on that.
So are there any further comments or questions, or shall we move on? Oh, Greg. I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Rudolph, did you pose a question to all the board members?
Pretty much.
Did you get an answer? from
I
all of
did.
us?
I did, with regards to my only question at this meeting, well, there were two. What information do you need at the next meeting that will help you make this decision, knowing that there's a couple more, so you can have a more informed discussion? And then the second one is centered around the complete reset. and it was sort of, just getting at the thermometer check to see what your tolerance was for resetting every single kid, versus, trying to minimize the amount of movement that we have.
Was it you or the 11th man who asked, well, then would you allow grandfathering of all students until they're done at their schools? Didn't you ask us that? Or was that a hypothetical question?
That was just a hypothetical. It probably wasn't my best analogy.
Hypothetical question.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
But we also
I thought that was a real question.
We also know, Greg, though, that if we have additional questions that we haven't presented tonight, we have the ability to send you those questions.
Correct.
So that we'll be able to get the responses that we need
Correct.
for the next step.
And in your defense, which is the reason why we want to do this over 4 meetings, you have to understand the EPTF and really staff have been living this for multiple years, right? So some of these numbers are just ingrained in my head, and it's easy for me to connect the dots. And we bring you the very high level data. And so today, as I was looking at everybody else, you all were given a lot of data, and it is a lot to sort of synthesize and go through at a first blush. And Tony took about 30 minutes to fly through it. It is to some degree a little bit unfair of you to ask you to make any type of informed decision, because it's natural that you're going to have a second question come up. So yes, I would encourage you to continue sending questions, which will help create what Ms. Geisels and I do on the 17th. And then again, you have the opportunity on the 31st with our goal of the 14th.
The way you say that it's our goal, and earlier you said that's why we want to make the decision on June 14th. Is there any chance we're not making this decision on June 14th? Why would we not make a decision on June 14th?
It depends on whether 3 of you vote together or whether you say, let's continue to study this.
Oh, I see.
I mean, technically you can wait until September. After that, you start getting pretty close, but since we started this journey 2.5 years ago, we have always set this last meeting as our deadline to have enrollment priorities finalized, because it was boundaries 1 year, enrollment priorities the next year. So we've always had it that way, but technically you can direct us to take more time.
I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll get there.
Yeah, the sooner the better, just for all those different communication pieces and
Right.
outreach and really
And the
figuring out the most
families.
thoughtful
Right.
way to approach this, to
I think
let
it's
the
just-
families know and let them figure out their strategy as well.
Yeah. But I think you're just throwing that out there for
Correct.
the process sake and
Correct.
for the transparency sake of that. In the end, it still
Yeah.
falls to us to make the decision by then. And if it doesn't, it's because of us and other factors. And then we'll move along.
Right. The last thing I would say is part of the reason why we want to get it done is it will take us about 6 months to revamp our enrollment system to get them going. And so it took us about 6 months to get them up running. That's also another consideration to take into account.
Thank you. So now we have board updates. I emailed mine to Ms. Lilguy. I assume most of us did. I did just want to say, I don't think we talked at our last meeting, but congratulations to the Huff community on getting their Distinguished School Award. That was, and Bub. I'm so sorry.
And one reason why I wanted to, and Dr. Rudolph, you can add to this, that I wanted to extend the meeting till 10:30 is I want to say publicly that the organization Children Now reached out to me, and then I reached out to our director of preschool, Terry Wallace, and to Dr. Rudolph. They see our preschool program as a model, and they want to write a report citing our preschool as a model that they are going to publish for the whole state. So I think that says a lot for the work that Terry Wallace is doing in preschool. It says a lot for the dedication that you have brought to high quality early education in our school district.
It's also board direction. So
Right.
I think it really speaks to the 5 of you.
It's a good
Here,
partnership.
here.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other board updates that need to be presented live?
Yeah, so I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Want to stay up longer.
Let's move on to items for future agendas. Are there any items for future agendas? Other than what we talked about with grandfathering, of
other
course.
than what's already
Yeah, and what's
listed.
already listed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we brought up one at the last meeting about having this teachers that presented at that STEAM practicum come and present to the board. Is that in the process of happening? We don't have to mention that again?
Mr. Chang is working on it.
Okay.
Okay. And the other items we brought up those are in the pipeline as well? Okay.
Okay, thank you. At 10:23, the meeting is adjourned.
You're totally good. Okay. I know you worry. It's a very big concern for you.
1 or 2 minutes. Which
We
part?
already told them what we wanted.
Mm.
And
By the
then
way,
they had
by the way.
two proposals and we're like, we like this.
By the way,